I love to see the towns passing by and to ride these rails neath God's blue sky. Let me travel this land from the mountains to the sea, 'cause that's the life I believe He meant for me. And when I'm gone and at my grave you stand, say God called home your rambling man.
Welcome to Ramblin' Man Podcast, episode number 46. This one is with Dr. Katy Ross, and it's about her getting her doctorate in LGBTQ plus issues. Katy co-runs a local to Knoxville group called Keep Knox Queer, and in the information I will put links to their Instagram and Facebook group, but please be respectable in that this is a locals only queer or queer ally group. So if you're not in Knoxville proper, please don't request to follow. This is a great talk. I really enjoyed talking to her. I had questions that I wasn't unsure of. It's great to get those cleared up. Our sponsor this week is Feral Giant. Feral Giant is a graphic design, illustration, and social media company. Do work for businesses small and large. Pretty much if you have any creative services need, they can take care of you. Visit them online at feralgiant.com or find them on any of the social media at Feral Giant. Without much further ado, here's the talk with Katy. It's called Two Bears, One Cave. It's Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura, these two comedians that are bigger guys. Both wife, two kids. Yeah, both of them have two kids now. But they just sit there and talk. And they say the most inappropriate things. And Tom is constantly trying to get Bert to say something inappropriate. And there was a point on this last episode where he had said stuff. He was like, I can't wait for you to do the super cut of me saying, and then he said everything together. And then he paused at the end and he was like, or I can just say it all together and you can just, and he was like, Tom went, yeah, take it from the top. One clean edit. Just but they say, like he was talking about how when he was in Bali, there was swastikas everywhere because it was a historic symbol and yada, yada, yada. But he was like, yeah, you're just going to pull a lot of me saying that and then going like, well, I'd probably put it in my man cave. All this shit. I was like, oh, God, this thing. He was like, this is going to be the end of our careers. I was like, no, this is hilarious because y'all are idiots. Like,
I mean, if you're having fun with it, that's all that really matters, right?
Yeah. And Bert's getting drunk at 9 a.m. So that's, he has some of the funniest stuff. He's called The Machine.
Okay.
When he was, God, I've heard this story so often I can almost quote it word for word. When he was 22 years old, he got involved with the Russian mafia. He was on an abroad program and he robbed a train.
Wow.
There's a 15-minute long story that's hilarious. But he was also on Conan and talked about throwing his daughter a period party.
Aww.
When she got her period. He didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
And he said his daughter called from school and was like, what's up, baby? And she said, Dad, I had a period. I need you to. He's like, wrong number. Call your mom. But he's hilarious. Like his last special, he had always this thing called Secret Time. Goddamn, I can't go that blue this early. There was something he said about his wife. He was like, Secret Time? My wife does this. Secret Time. Like that. And he would just tell these little asides. He's the funniest. Anyway, that's Bert. That's another podcast. Unofficial sponsor of this podcast is Two Bears, One Cave.
Yeah, I'll give it a listen.
Or what else did he call it? Thick Boys with three
Thick
C's.
Boys?
With 3 C's.
Thick boys.
Oh my God.
Does the boys have a Z on it? Because
It has to.
It has to.
It has to. Okay, I'm going to start with a really dumb question.
Yeah.
Do you have to get your master's before you get a PhD? Or is it advised? Or
Typically, yes. The path is bachelor's. I mean, it could be associate's, bachelor's, and then master's, and then PhD.
right.
There are some people who go straight into a PhD program from their bachelor's, from their undergraduate.
Okay.
And so, for instance, the program that I graduated from, there's some people who went right in, and then within the first year, 2 years, based on the coursework, they essentially receive their master's because they've been doing the coursework that would account for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then the final 2 years is them writing their dissertation and being done.
Okay. And I even had my friend Lance on here talking about his PhD, and it's been so long that I've forgotten. Well, I just remember one of my friends from high school, she got her law degree without ever getting her bachelor's. I swear. She told me that. She was like, oh, yeah, I didn't finish my bachelor's. She did enough and then just went straight to law school.
Wow.
I was like, that sounds like some 1950s shit. Where
yeah, I mean, some people find a way to work the system so that they don't have to do as much schooling. And by all means, if you are smart enough to figure it out, then do it. I was not.
Also, I don't think she officially graduated from high school.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. Like, some people don't finish high school, they don't get a diploma, and yet, here they are with bukus of degrees beyond that.
Or you think of a lot of those guys in Alabama who are rocket technicians that are, or somebody we know who is a nuclear engineer out in Oak Ridge that, he probably barely has a college degree or something, and it's probably back when it was quarters and he got it in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, it's insane.
Well, it just points to the issue of our educational and economic systems, of how just because someone doesn't finish a certain degree or even high school doesn't equate to the amount of smarts that they have, right? And that said too, I know people who have a PhD that probably shouldn't have one, but they were pushed through because no one wanted to deal with it.
I'm that way with people I know who have MBAs.
Yeah.
That are just like, one guy actually, one of my close friends at one point yelled at me because he was, he'd gotten his MBA. He was a director of marketing at a bank, and he applied for a job at a medical company doing marketing. And I think it was like a junior VP or a VP position, and they turned him down because he didn't have any medical experience. And he said at the time, he was like, I have my MBA. I can do whatever. And later on, at that time, I was like, shut up, you're an idiot. Later on, I thought, no, that's true. I'm a graphic designer, and I've done design. And once you get that base level of knowledge, it does make sense. But him using that MBA as a reason. There was actually a woman that a friend of mine wanted me to date, that she got a job as an assistant in a hotel. God, I hope she doesn't listen to this, but it's okay. Hey, this is why I don't talk to you anymore, because you're shitty to me in a text. She got a job as an assistant in a hotel assisting the marketing department. And she was talking about all these grand schemes. I'm going to pitch them on, this idea and this idea. I was like, if you ever want to run an idea by me, I'm happy to be. And she was like, I have my master's in marketing.
Oh my God.
I wish I could film your face right. She's like, I have my this big long paragraph of text. I was like, I've been doing this for almost 30 years. I still run ideas by people. Like what? And I unfriend. I was like, you know what? This person's I can't deal with this anymore. So I like unfriended, unfollowed, did all that. And then she popped up again recently. She's getting her PhD in marketing right now.
Oh, good for her.
And she's like, God, I don't want to crack on age.
No.
But there is a difference. I think she's like 28 or 29 or 30. But it's like, I don't know that you've done anything to this point. I don't want to say just stayed in school. I know what she did. Well, hell, I'm already. She worked in a call center while she did all this.
Okay.
But I was like, but you've not been working in the field. Like, you've not actually been learning this shit. You're leaning on, well, I have these pieces of paper, and I spend all this money. So I am knowledgeable in marketing. I was like, market to me.
Right.
Because I'm going to laugh my ass at you.
You got to start at the bottom level before you can reach to the top. Like, even with the piece of paper,
Right.
like, that paper is not the bottom level. That paper should be in some ways representative to say, okay, I've done my work. I know my shit because I've been in the trenches.
Yeah.
And this paper proves that. But some people, they just skirt by.
See, and maybe this is something you can explain to me. God, this is just me on my soapbox. This is what happens when I'm all... I had like 3 cups of coffee at Vienna, and their coffee is very strong.
It is.
So there are times in meetings where I've been shaking just like, oh, shit.
I didn't think that was possible with you, Jody.
I think with coffee, if I've not had enough water,
Oh, wow.
I'm totally like...
You got to hydrate.
Yeah. I think the weirdest thing, and I think this is something that's got to look at getting changed. The fact that I can't teach design at LMU because I don't have my master's is kind of ridiculous.
Well, so teaching at colleges, it's standard to have a master's degree, even adjuncts.
Yeah.
Even adjuncts.
Yeah. I even looked at being an adjunct.
They get paid shit, but you still have to have a master's.
Pellissippi, I had to have my master's. Like, this is an associate's degree.
Yeah.
I graduated from here.
Yep.
It's like, that's insane. I don't know. I feel like there should be some balance. If it's a technical field, there should be some balance on, like, if you've been doing it this many years, even if I've taken aptitude tests to show that I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I had a guy that was my adjunct teacher. I'm not going to call him a professor. And he was 25. And think back, I was like, he was a terrible teacher. He was trying to be our buddy. And there were a lot of people in the class older than him. I was like, I'm going to sound like an arrogant prick when I say this. Those kids at LMU, those kids at Pellissippi are kind of missing out that I'm not there teaching.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah, and that's a shitty thing to say, but it's also like, but I've also taught middle schoolers and high schoolers, and they've gotten a lot, like, I literally have proof in the pudding. So, I don't know. That part drives me nuts. But I think that's a anomaly, I guess, because it's a technical field, not I don't know.
Well, again, goes back to the fails of our educational system. I had professors in college who, so I immediately think of my astronomy professor. I'm not a science person. I never have been. I like looking at the stars, and I can still point out a couple of constellations. But we had to take a lab with the class. Yeah. And the lab had a different teacher. And he was really engaging. He was super fun. But then you go into the classroom and it's this large lecture of like 200 people. And the professor was there to do research. He wasn't there to teach. And so that's where I see the split is usually professors, they pick one of 2 routes. They go into teaching to teach and then do research because in most cases they have to. And in some cases they want to. Or they go into teaching because they have to in order to do their research and be published.
Okay.
And so you find that a lot of people are on one track or the other. And it makes that the people who are there to teach are the good teachers. Yeah. Because they want to be there. They want to help other people, students, flourish and learn, and they really believe in their field and this, that, and the other. And then the research comes secondary, if at all. Okay. I'm lucky that in the position I'm interested, research is not required. I like my research, but having just finished my dissertation, I am excited to take a step back and not think about it. That said, though, I do have a couple of projects that I'm working on because I'm a glutton for punishment. Yeah.
I think about Lance, like my buddy, I think he said he had to read 300 or 400 books 3 times to be able to discuss them on a certain, because his PhD is in literature, I think.
Oh, yeah.
But he was just, I want to go, when you get done, how long is it until you actually read a book? Are you going to wait? Like, because I read 108 books in 1 year. And I've been lucky to hit double digits any year since then because I just burnt myself out. And I have to really enjoy it. Like, I've got a stack of like 5 books here. I was like, these are books that I'm actually excited about reading. It's like, but other ones, it's like, I don't really want to do that.
Yeah. I mean, so normally I would say I'm part of a book club, but I'm trying to get better at saying I run a book club.
Okay.
Taking responsibility for the things that I do and administrate. It's something that Kristen's trying to get on me for.
Okay.
But I run a book club, and that helps keep me accountable for reading, right? Because through the entire dissertation in my PhD program, if I read, it was, just stacks on stacks and stacks of journal articles, books that were relevant, but they were all like academic and high level thinking. And so my brain was fried. I was kaput. But with this book club, it allows me to kind of dabble in different areas. So, for instance, we read Delusions of Gender by I can't remember the author's name, but we recently read it, and that's more of a higher level academic reading. But then right after, we read a young adult fiction novel.
Okay.
And so it kind of breaks up the issue of reading at a higher level, reading at a lower level, something that's super easy and quick to get through. I just finished the book early so that Kristen could actually read it for this next book club, because I already had it. But we just finished reading Gender Outlaws, The Next Generation by Bornstein and Bergman.
Is that the one with the really cool cover? I think you invited me to the book club.
Yes.
That has a really cool
cover. It has it's like graphic, and it
Yeah.
has the people and the phones, and yeah.
I'm struggling. The book club I'm in, so we read Good Omens last month.
Oh, yeah.
Which I did not finish.
I didn't realize that was part of the book club, because I remember you reading that when we did our reading day at the breweries.
That's as far as I got.
Wait, where? Oh, Jody.
I've also been working 70 to 80 to 90 hours a week. So I am, yeah. And then...
Dropping
But
shit.
it's funny. Fantasy.
Yeah.
Good Omens. So next month we're reading Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad, which won the Pulitzer and was on Oprah's book club. So that's our book club, is we just try and figure out.
Reaching for more books.
Yeah, I'm reaching for more books. So what's funny is I seem to be the only one who suggests books. Otherwise, we're sitting at the end of book club and they're like, I don't know. Let's just look up what's a good book. So I want to suggest this for next month. I want to suggest it for this month. It's this comedian named Miss Pat.
Okay.
That when she got pregnant at 12.
Whoa.
Yep. Had a kid at 13. I think had a second kid by the time she was 14. She was selling drugs at 13. She's from Atlanta.
Ooh.
She's hilarious.
Yeah.
But this is her story.
Okay.
And I'm like, I want everybody to read this book, because I know it's going to be funny, but I also know it's going to be a little traumatizing. And I love her to death, and she jokes all the time. She's like, all these white boys love me. They get up there on stage. She's talking about comedians. She's like, they get up there and talk about their damn cats. I don't want to hear about the damn cats. He's like, these white boys. She just calls it white. The way she flings white boys. I was like, can you record that into my phone? I want to have that as my ringtone. White boy. Like, I want that so much. And then Dad got me this book on James Agee's time when he was in Tennessee.
Okay.
Called Rufus. But yeah, these are ones. Oh yeah, and the Win Without Pitching Manifesto. And Man in the Mirror, who I'm recording on Friday, LaRue Cook, he wrote for ESPN, started doing really well. He's written for like The Bitter Southerner, a lot of those, but he just quit. He started driving for Uber and Lyft.
Okay.
Man in the Rearview Mirror, he started writing stories about the people who...
Oh, cool. I think I remember you saying something about that.
Yeah, he
book.
came and spoke at Union Avenue Books.
That's what it was.
And but he lives down in Decatur, Georgia.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And he was like, well, I'll be in Knoxville towards the end of the month. I was like, I need a break. I'm going to come down to Atlanta. And he's like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. And I was like, I've already been looking at like hotels and shit. And I'm like, should I justify spending the money? And I found a hotel for like 64 or 70 bucks. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Go see Nikki Glazer at the Punchline and go to a bunch of museums on Saturday. And
it'll be a nice break.
it will be a nice break. but it's still spending the. It's
Well-
been so low that I'm like, "Ugh, I don't know that. It's like, you know what? For $200, I'm going to spend $200 between gas and everything. That's fine.
Whip you up some PB&Js. Take them with you.
No, part of it is I've heard about this pizza place I need, and there's a barbecue place. I hate to say it. That's a big thing. It's like, well, if I go,
Well, it's the food. Absolutely.
I can go to this barbecue place and this pizza place, and I can manage all of the food I want to eat. Even talking to him, I was like, yeah, there's this place I want to go to. He's like, okay, we'll do lunch beforehand. I was like, come on, man. I'm a pro, man. I'm going to want to eat, man. I was like, I'm going to take you to some place you probably never heard of. But yeah, from our book club, it's good and balanced, but it's still hard.
It is. I mean, there are books that I don't finish, but I mean,
Yeah.
that's something that in our book club we try to emphasize is that you don't even have to read the book. You can just come and
That's us.
participate, talk and discuss. If something comes up and you're like, oh yeah, I have something to share on that. Or if you want to come and just listen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like it's come as you are and participate as much or as little as you want. You know, it's just the purpose, I think, is for community, right? Just to give us a topic to talk about and then let it run.
The funny part about that is because that all sounds very positive. So the month before, our book was one of Chelsea Handler's book.
Oh God, I love her. Her books are so easy to read. They're hysterical.
It's sitting up there. I can't remember which one it was, but I hated it so much.
Really?
I hated it because I think it was like her second or third book, and I was
Yeah.
like, this feels like you got an advance for a book.
Yeah.
I was like, there was one good story in there. I was like, damn it. I was like, I know she's better than that. But it was, I think everybody in the group except one, everybody finished it and everybody hated it. Except for like one person. They were like, I liked it. And I was like,
I mean, it is a lot of like string of consciousness kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think I read her first one or maybe even her second one, and I was on a plane going to a conference, and I read it in that one flight, and that was the first time
yeah.
I'd ever done that because it was so. I mean, I just flipping right through
Yeah.
it, and I remember laughing out loud on a plane, right?
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
just like, okay, all right. So that's what enticed me to keep going, but
Yeah.
I can see how other people would kind of be like,
yeah, I think I'm kind of burnt out. I used to like her a lot, and I think I'm kind of burnt out because she just seems like a not nice person. Like, she just seems...
I mean, but that's kind of her shtick.
I know.
You know, like she's not a nice person.
I think it was she used to have fun with it when she had her
Yeah.
show, and now it just seems like I'm not going to do that or stuff like that. I was like, oh my God, come on, man. I don't know. Anyway, book club. I think that came from talking about Lance and reading. So here I'm gonna go all the way back.
Okay.
What did you want to be when you were growing up?
The thing that sticks out the most to me was a vet
Okay.
because I like animals,
Okay.
but I don't like blood or needles,
I'm with you.
and that was discovered pretty quickly.
Okay.
So from when I was a small child,
Yeah.
I wanted to work with animals because I loved animals. But then growing up, I was just like, I don't know, I'm just going to live my teenage life and let it happen. And then in eighth grade, they're like, okay, you need to pick on this sheet. What do you want to do with your life?
Oh my God.
I know. I was like, I'm 13.
Yeah.
I don't have a fucking clue.
Yeah.
Like, how am I supposed to know? I'm going to be a totally different person in 10 years.
Yeah.
And of course I am. But yeah, I don't even remember what I chose. But I remember going to my college orientation and they were like, okay, so what do you want to major in? And I was like, well, I like to talk. What can I do
Yeah.
with that? And they're like, communication. And I
Yeah.
said, okay, great. So they put me in communications, which there's a difference between communications and communication studies.
Okay.
The S is different. So communications is broadcasting, journalism,
a lot of athletes.
lot of athletes.
The look on your face is perfect.
lot of athletes.
athletes.
I've taught a lot of football players. Yes, I have.
But I hate to say it, they need to learn.
They need to learn. I mean, well, everyone needs to learn,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
But communications, it's seen as more of an easy major because
Right.
you're just talking, right? But in reality, it's actually quite difficult. And so I started in communications. I started in
With the S.
With yes, yep.
Okay.
With PR, public relations.
Yeah.
And I remember I took a class on press releases, and I hated it.
Press releases are a nightmare.
I fucking hated it. I was so over it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I got to reevaluate, because if I continue down this path, I'm going to end up in a field where the jobs are ones I don't want.
Yeah.
So that's when I discovered communication studies.
Okay.
So that field looks at how humans communicate verbally, non-verbally, in organizations, interpersonally,
Okay.
in small groups, intrapersonally, right? So like, how do you communicate with yourself, your inner thoughts and things like that? So it's much more broad, a little less concrete. Well, actually quite less concrete. Yet a lot of the textbooks try to make it more concrete in order to teach it. So I mean, it's you're I think of it, and I'm coming up with this in the moment. I think of it, communications is like playing with Play-Doh, right?
Okay.
It's still solid. You can build things.
Yeah.
You can mix colors if you want, but you can still see the different colors. Communication studies is like playing with putty.
Okay.
It's much more sticky, and it kind of covers everything.
Yeah.
I feel like that was pretty good.
Yeah. And settles.
It does.
Yeah, and settles.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything in high school that kind of you look back on now and you go, I was heading down this path?
Oh yeah. No. I wrote in my senior year, we had to write some kind of paper.
Right. And
I always loved doing research. I loved learning, which is how I knew that I wasn't going to quit going to school. Did I know I was going to get PhD? Absolutely not. Oh my God. Had you told me, I would have been like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not my life. I still to this day, I'm swallowing the truth. But yeah, I love to do research, and I wrote a paper on Wicca.
Yeah.
And I was just so fascinated by like, this is something I haven't learned, but I'm interested in. And by that time I was rather non-religious, given past traumatic history with religion.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I did pretty well in the paper, and I really enjoyed the process. And, you know, now having written papers and published them, yeah, that's an easy hindsight of, okay, this was bound to happen.
That was a weird thing in college when I took speech class. I thought it was going to be more getting up and talking, but it ended up being almost more of a self-debate class. That's the better way I think I could put it, in that you had to do so much research and argue your point. But you were arguing to no one. You were just selling your point.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what speech is, you know?
I'm dumb. I didn't
know.
I thought it was just going to be learning how to talk in front of people.
And that's what, no, you're, I wouldn't say you're dumb. I say you're in the majority. A lot of students who walk into my public speaking classrooms, they either have no experience or they have little experience.
Yeah.
Very few of them have legit experience with public speaking. But they often come in and they're like, I'm just going to talk, right? And they know that they're going to talk in front of public, if you will. And so that, you know, for them is the classroom or their classmates. And so they just think they're going to get up and speak. But a lot of it is you have to plan what you're going to say. I mean, my life runs on metaphors and analogies, and I just use them constantly because it makes sense in my head.
It's going to be a drinking game for this one.
Oh my God.
A metaphor analogy.
Get ready. You're going to get wasted.
Yeah.
So I always tell my students, like, in the same way that you wouldn't wake up tomorrow and say, you know, I think, I'm going to go run a 5K. Let's do that today. That sounds great. Right. You wouldn't do that because your body would hate you. You would keel over and die. Same way, you wouldn't wake up tomorrow and say, you know, I'm going to give a solid, rock solid speech. It's not going to happen because you're going to fumble over your words. Your ideas aren't organized. You have no evidence to back up your claims. Like you gotta put work into it. You have to practice.
Okay.
And so that seems to go over rather well with my students because they're like, oh, okay, I get it. So I can't wake up and procrastinate like hell and just give a speech off the cuff. No, you cannot, especially not in my class. That will not fly.
Oops.
Right.
That was one of the questions I wrote down, improv in speech, because But because I'm a designer, anytime I've had to speak like to classes or anything, I always do graphics and have a guideline.
Right.
But for the most part, I just wing it as I go. And like I have a guideline. I know I need to speak for X amount of time. So I'm going to speak, but in the moment, I can't be stuck on certain word. Like the TED Talk thing drives me nuts because it's like you have to everything word perfect. I was like, I can't do that.
TED Talks are a different breed. I do love them. I show them a lot in my classroom because they are very useful, especially of the content. So like I have my students when we talk about informative speaking, I show them a video about whale poo.
Okay.
It's it's like 6 minutes long. And of course I can't remember her name, the speaker's name. But I know she's from India. And so she has a thick accent, which only complicates the task I'm asking of my students is I need you to evaluate this speaker on their informative topic, but also tangentially, I need you to open your ears and try to listen to people with different accents because not everyone's going to be American and have, an American accent of any type. And so this is, culturally expanding their areas. But yeah, so TED Talks are super useful, but they are not as representative as your average speaking event. But on the point of improv is actually very important for speeches.
Okay.
So what you're describing in terms of having a guideline, kind of knowing where you're going to go with your information and what you're going to share, but then in the moment, not, sticking so hard to it. That's what we call extemporaneous speaking.
Okay.
Extemporaneous. I usually have to repeat that because my students are like, what?
Yeah.
Extemporaneous. And so it's a mixture between having memorized your speech, having written it all out, memorized it word for word, and an impromptu speech where you are given your topic that day in that moment and you have 5 to 10 minutes maybe to prep, which I do make my students do. It's actually one of my more fun speeches. I have them... I'm very kind and generous. I know a lot of professors who are just like, okay, here's your topic. Here's a blank sheet of paper, 5 minutes, plan and go. I give them a rubric to follow to help outline their information. But I do time them. But one of the ways I do it is, in terms of topic, is I have them close their eyes and they can't open their eyes until I say so that everyone has their object. And I go around and they pull an object out of a bag, and one of them is rubber duckies. And so,
oh my God, you're obsessed with.
I know, and I just don't understand it. I never have, but something about the rubber duck, it just, it's a little obsessive, but just a little. Like I don't have any.
No judgment.
Right? Like everyone has their thing. I don't have any in the house.
Okay.
They're only in my office.
Do you not?
No.
Maybe that. No. Okay.
At Halloween, yes, because I have some zombie ducks.
But I thought there were some, but it may have been in the interim of you not in an office.
Correct.
Yeah. So that may have been where I saw some of them was they're going from one office to another.
Exactly. Yeah. So having just left a recent job and going into another one and having to switch entire offices and campuses and all that. Yeah. All of them are now currently in my new office. Nice. But I have some displayed. But yeah, I bought this giant bag of just an array of rubber ducks online. And there's football duck, there's unicorn duck, there's spotted ducks like polka dots. There's wrestling ducks. I have zombie ducks. I have all the sport ducks: baseball, basketball, tennis, golf, softball. So they, oh, and there's a Minecraft duck, which I didn't know it was called a Minecraft duck until my students got it. And they're like, well, this duck lives in Minecraft world. And I was like, okay, never played it, but I'm familiar. But it's a boxy duck, essentially. And
Boxy Duck is a great band name.
It is a great band. Boxy Duck. Yes. Like a little like rock metal. Yeah.
Boxy Duck.
But anyways, they choose a duck, and then they have to come up with its backstory. What's its name? What's its family life? What's its job? Where does it live? right? Like, what does it do on an average day, morning, afternoon, evening?
Right.
And then they get up and they give a speech about their duck, and they're like, okay, this is my friend. But I find that most of them have fun with it, especially because they have an object and they actually have a visual that they can work with.
Right.
Whereas other times I've done it so that they have a slip of paper and it's like a prompt question, where one of my favorites is, how would you modify a snail to make it go faster?
So, oh my God. Okay. On those, do you give them a heads up that you're doing an improv one so that they can almost like mentally switch to like, I'm going to have to make up a bunch of crap here?
Typically, yeah,
Okay.
I do. I mean, I create my course schedule at the beginning, like before the beginning of the semester, and they have that from day one. And so it's up to them to be responsible enough to actually look at the schedule, because most of them don't.
Right.
Students. And I put the impromptu speech on the schedule.
Okay.
So they know what day it's happening.
Okay.
But most of them forget, or, one person will be like, oh, well, what do we need you to do to prepare for this? And I was like, show up to class.
Yeah.
They're like, but like, it's
Yeah,
a
I was
speech.
going to say, aren't there some people that are very like type A, like that stresses the hell out?
It
And
does.
there's probably some idiot like me that'd be like, oh, thank God.
Some of them thrive on it.
Yeah.
They love like the extra creativity and just the ability to just kind of throw thoughts on paper and then say them.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas others, myself included, would prefer to have more of the time to
Right.
kind of digest and do your research and figure things out and how you're going to say it so that it can be the most informative or persuasive or
Right.
entertaining or whatever your purpose is.
Okay, there's two paths. So you do give prompts for each speech. Like when I was in speech class, we had to do like one on ethics, one that was demonstrative.
Mm-hmm. Demonstrative.
Is that really how you say that?
English. Yeah,
Okay.
that's
'Cause
technically.
demonstrative sounds like evil to me.
It does, but it's just to demonstrate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas demonstrative sounds.
Demonstrative is clunky.
Yeah.
Demonstrative.
Yeah.
But demonstrative makes you sound smart, so.
Okay. It was interesting. Our demonstrative one, I'm going to change. One of the guys worked at the melting pot.
Oh.
So we
fun.
all got like this amazing food. One guy brought in an engine block for a Jaguar.
Whoa.
So he showed how to change points and plugs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I gave one on working out and lifting weights.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. And I had two guys get up there. One of them was a rugby player at UT.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one was a skinny dude who played baseball. Well, I just had free weights, and he put it over his head and fell into the board. I was like, oh, God. I broke him. I broke the board. Oh, shit. But it was funny. The rugby guy, there was one other speech. He was like, I got kicked in the throat. I can't talk. Like, he literally got kicked in the throat.
Yeah.
And the teacher's like, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to do anything. I also remember that teacher arguing that ballet dancers were stronger than football players. And she was like, because they can stay on their tippy toe and all this. I was like, I can lift a refrigerator. I was like, I understand. I was like, it's all different. It's
a different kind of strength.
It's different kind of strength.
Yeah. The different muscles in different areas are stronger, right?
But
Like
that's
their big toes
Oh, yeah.
are like, I mean, their big toe
their
could lift
leg
a refrigerator.
muscles, their calf muscles are stronger, or as strong as a offensive lineman's thigh muscles.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good way of. That's my analogy. That's not even an analogy.
Take a drink.
Yeah, take a drink. But she kept arguing. I was like, stop. Just please stop. Because it's two. I was trying to explain. It's like, no, it's two different things.
Yeah.
She was like, because at that point, it was a point in time when a lot of coaches were getting football players to train in ballet to get them stronger and more lighter and better on their feet.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing. She was like, well, of course they could, because ballet dancers are stronger than... I was like, I can lift a refrigerator.
I mean, here's the thing. It's like, here you go. Take a drink.
Okay.
Apples and oranges.
Yeah.
They're both fruit,
Yeah.
so they're both athletes.
Yeah.
But different.
Yeah. Well, it's even within working out and weightlifting is something I talked about there, which was I knew some guys that could bench press a ton of weight. I hate to keep going back to the refrigerator, but they couldn't lift a refrigerator because they didn't build up their leg muscles. They didn't know the physics of how to make that work. I was like, I can't bench press that much, but I can. I've literally lifted a commercial refrigerator.
Right.
Like,
don't skip leg day, kids.
No. There you go. That was my... But that was... And we had one on ethics that I remember I checked out a bunch of books that I was going to do a speech on how pornography affected the world, which was funny because it was in the early days of the internet, and I kind of saw where that was going. So that was... And then at the last minute, I threw it all out and did an ethics speech on the N-word.
Wow. Okay.
Because I'm a white guy, but I grew up in a predominantly black area. And also, oddly enough, grew up with a grandfather who was born in the teens, early 20s, who was like, my boys do not say that word. Like, it was very progressive and all that stuff. And my dad was always like, no. The story I love telling is we were at a bar when I was like 6 or 8 years old. Because him and my uncles took me to bars.
Right.
So I'm sitting up on a stool, and it's me and my dad. And a guy, this was back in the day when only sailors or bikers had tattoos. He had a tattoo on his forearm. I remember that. And the guy kept throwing the N-word out. And my dad just turned around to me and looked back at that guy and put a finger up and said, if you say that word, or that's my son, a lot of his friends are black. You say that word one more time, he's going to get off that stool, he's going to walk over and he's going to kick the shit out of you. And I'm going to let that happen or something along that.
Yeah.
And the guy looked at me and then looked at my dad and walked away. And it took me a few times telling that story going, oh, yeah, he's also looking at my dad who's 6'4", big old truck driver dude. But yeah, but that's just, so I gave a speech and I was trying not to cry the entire speech. It's really to the point to where I walked away and one of the guy who rebuilt the engine, his wife was in there. She started like holding my arm and like, are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm just a little emotional. I've broken people's faces for saying that. Like it was, but I had no data, anything. And, but it was like a 7-minute long speech.
Yeah.
And all I did was kind of tell stories and told like history of that word and how, all this stuff that I just knew.
Right.
Because I read Roots when I was in the 7th grade.
Oh, well, yeah. So I have students that do the same thing. They're like, well, I just wrote all this down because I know it. Like, this is my knowledge. I'm like, yes, I understand that. And that's good that you have all this knowledge, but you still have to cite your sources because it only improves your credibility. Right. It's like saying, so no, that one's going to fall apart. Don't take a drink.
Okay.
I had it and then it left.
Put the Jack Daniels back in the bottle.
But on your point of topics. So I'm at Pellissippi now, which I'm very excited about. And their public speaking classes, basically the only requirement on my part is that 60% of it be speaking based.
Okay.
And so I have my students give a total of 6 speeches.
I was going to say, I thought we gave about 6 speeches.
So they do an introductory and then they do an impromptu, and then they do 2 informative and 2 persuasive. And I basically have the freedom to choose what those look like. And so for the first informative and persuasive speech, I let them choose their own topics, just anything. And then, of course, they have to check it with me, and I approve it to say, okay, this is a really good one. Go forth and do your research. And then for the second ones on each category, I kind of narrow it. And so for the second informative speech, I do a social justice topic.
That's cool.
And the trick is most social justice topics are very charged and opinionated.
Right.
But they have to give an informative speech on it. So they can't include their opinion. They can't use biased sources. They just have to educate on their social justice topic. And so I give them this nice long list to choose from if they're just fresh out of ideas, but also to give them an idea of, what it could look like.
Right.
So I've had students who I've had speeches on police brutality, on baby beauty pageants,
Oh, good Lord. I want to hear
yeah.
that speech.
I've heard some really interesting things. And that's one of the things that I enjoy most about my job, especially teaching public speaking, is that I get to hear these students speak on topics that they've done research and they've spent time on,
Right.
and that they also have interest in. And that's the whole thing, is I let them choose their topics with approval,
Right.
because if I give them a topic and they're not interested in it, then that's only going to hurt their own grade.
Right.
So we do social justice, and then for the final persuasive speech, I have them do a marketing pitch. And this is the only one where I allow them to use a visual aid, which I know is different than most people because everyone wants to use a visual aid. But my argument is that I want them to focus on developing their speaking skills
Right.
before they bring in an extra element. And so the marketing pitch, they have to either choose or create their own product or service
That's awesome.
to sell to the class, and they have to bring in some kind of visual aid. So one of the most creative and memorable speeches I had, if there are any Rick and Morty fans,
Yeah. Pickle Rick.
Pickle Rick.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so good. I had a student who marketed the Plumbus.
Plumbus.
Do you remember the Plumbus?
No.
You got to look it up. It's
I am not the deepest. I think I've watched season 1, and I was like, I am not stoned enough to understand this show.
Yes. Well, so
Yes, well.
I think it's I mean, it took me a couple of times to like get used to the humor and actually
Right.
enjoy it. But the Plumbus is it's kind of like a no nonsense product in the show, and they show the whole process of making it. And the student had access to a 3D printer, and he actually made
Oh
a
my God.
Plumbus and brought it in as his visual aid. He also used a PowerPoint, and he showed the clip of them making it in the show.
Yeah.
But it was just brilliant. Oh my gosh.
The only reason I know Pickle Rick is because Matt at Pretentious Glass made a pickle out of the glass.
No.
And he was like, Pickle Rick. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so I had to watch the episode
Yes.
to understand the context.
Pickle
I was like,
Rick.
I can't believe you made a damn pickle. Like, what the? Okay, so the kid had a 3. Good Lord.
Yeah, it was involved. No, the funny thing is that his other option was to market the Greyhound dog,
Okay.
like greyhounds. And I was like, okay, that's cool, but this is creative.
I was going to say, with some of these, do you see them, do you kind of do that to help them get excited about?
Yeah.
Like that
Oh, yeah.
helps drive.
Absolutely. If they can find a more creative topic where they are excited about it, and like that's something that they really want to do, then by all means, I've had students who create their own food truck as their
That's cool.
service, and that's what they market. I've had a lot of students who pick existing products. I had one student, this is the last week of a summer class that I'm teaching, and I am very grateful for that. But I had one student just last week who gave a speech on deodorant wipes, and instead of like your traditional deodorant stick. And part of his argument was, does your deodorant collect and clump in your armpit hair? Does it not last throughout the day? Do you work long hours? And I mean, the whole shtick is I encourage them to kind of make it more into a infomercial, right? So think like Billy Mays,
Right. OxyClean.
OxyClean,
Yeah.
or the
Was it
super absorbent towels,
and the slap chop or whatever that thing was called? Yeah.
Yeah, all of those things.
Yeah.
So the more they can get into that kind of
Yeah.
having fun with it, the Snuggie is the one that I always show them.
Yeah.
Get on the Snuggie. Yeah.
I may have to P.S. here and tell you a story about my mom and Snuggies, but keep going. So
Yes.
you get them. You kind of show that to them as an example
Yeah.
of what you're looking for.
Exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do you teach them how to do research, or is that like the front end of the class? Is like, here's what you're going to have to do.
Yeah, we do a lot of front end.
Since you said a lot of people
Learning.
come in like me, like, oh, I'm just not going to talk in front
Yeah.
of people.
We do a lot of front end learning because you have to learn how to conduct research and put together a speech and find the information that you want to find before
Right.
you can actually give it. Now, the unfortunate part of that is that the way that the semester is laid out, sometimes they have to give a speech before they know how to do certain things.
Oh, yeah.
And so because of that, I adjust my grading and my expectations when they give that speech, because it's like, okay, well, I know you haven't learned how to properly transition between your points, so I'm not going to grade you as harshly on that.
Right.
But the things that you have learned to do, that's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
So we have chapters on supporting material and how to do research. Something that I do that I, for some reason, have found other professors to not do as much or even at all, is I bring in outside people to talk about how to do research. So like I go to the librarians and I say, hey, I want you to come to my class and teach my students how to use the library website to find the things that they need.
Yeah.
Because I find that having someone else come into the classroom and kind of teach them breaks up the monotony of them just getting bored with my face and my voice.
Yeah.
But it's also it's a hands-on learning tool. You know, like they actually, because every library website is different. And so figuring out what buttons to click and what filters to choose, because it can be complicated, especially for people. And it can
be antiquated to where a lot of the kids today would be like, why is this not just working how it should work?
Exactly. But even still, most of my kids are still going to Google. And they'll just type in whatever they're searching on Google because that's what they know. That's what they know research is. Yeah. And it's infuriating because it's like, that's not research. Oh. And so if they insist on using Google, I tell them to at least look on Google Scholar.
Okay.
Because then you have more of a chance to find more credible sources.
So, because I'm curious, because I run like social media knocks where we meet once a month. And a lot of times when I do research, I use Google, but then I'll go on somewhere like Sprout Social. That's all they do is data analysis for social media.
Oh, okay.
So I find businesses in place. Like right now, I'm working up an SEO estimate for a company. Mm-hmm. So I found a guy who is a expert in SEO, and it's wild because every one of his articles links to another article. So right in the middle one, it's like, son of a bitch, now I gotta go read this article. And I went like 8 articles deep, and I was like, all right. I finally got back to the original. I was like, what was I reading about?
But that's research.
Yeah.
It's complicated, it's messy, it's infuriating, but it's helpful. Here's another analogy for you. Research, the collective research, is a massive, ongoing, cyclical conversation between researchers. Okay. So you find one topic, just like you said, and you're going to find other sources that are linked in there. That's because those people have talked about that same topic, but maybe in a smaller way or a bigger way, or it's a continuation of that same conversation.
Yeah.
So it's just this giant network of conversation that you have to ruffle through to find what you're looking for.
Yeah, because the article I was mainly reading, because I couldn't figure out how to estimate for SEO, because I'm used to, if I work on it, I've actually only worked on SEO on a very small level. But I kind of know how to do it. I kind of know the parameters. And it's like, I know enough to know that I can help you. But it was like how to price for that. Mm-hmm. And then in there I found like link building. I was like, I don't know what link building is. I know what backlinking is. I know what all this. And so I had to read the article on link building. So it was that, to where exactly what you're saying. There were some of his articles that were so focused. It's like, I should have been reading this guy for years, because there was so much built up to where I was like, that's why I say I was like 6 or 8 deep. And I was like, son of a bitch, man. I was like, okay, now I have all this. It's like the Matrix. Now I have all this information. So then that made my estimate even harder, because it's like, holy shit.
Well, part of I would say one of, if not the biggest parts of doing research is looking at credibility. Okay. Because so having a PhD in communication studies, specifically in queer and trans populations, right? If I write and I have articles that talk about that population, then I can be seen as credible because of 2 things. Because, I should rephrase. There's 2 questions that you want to ask when looking at the credibility of a source. Mm-hmm. What are they writing on? Mm-hmm. And what's the topic and who's writing? Mm-hmm. No, I said that wrong. No, let me try again. Okay. First question is, who is writing, and what is their background?
On that topic. On
that topic, right?
Gotcha.
So like, who is writing? If I'm writing, right? Katy Ross is writing. What are they writing on? If I was going to write on rubber ducks, that's not a credible article because I don't have a background in rubber ducks. I don't have a degree in rubber ducks.
Yeah.
Although that would be pretty badass.
I want to see somebody try and do that.
I have a PhD in rubber ducks.
Although, good Lord, have you ever seen the film PC? I'm going to guess no because it came out PCU with Jeremy Piven.
No.
It's kind of funny in that there's a guy trying to get his PhD in the Caine Hackman theory, and that at any point in time there is either a Michael Caine or a Gene Hackman movie on TV, and that's the entire his entire thesis. I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, that's the thing about PhDs is that your dissertation is meant to be so specific that no one else is going to look at it and do the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so credibility. So if you read one of my articles, I'm credible because I have been researching trans and queer communities and communication studies for the last 11 years.
Yeah.
So, and that's as long as I've been in college. So yeah, I mean, but that's kind of the gist of it.
So you kind of teach them to make sure their sources are credible.
Exactly.
Okay. In your class, because it is on that level, do you see, is it mostly younger people or is there older people too? Because when I was going to college, it seemed to be almost more older people than younger people.
There's certainly a mix. It also
I must say, associates. I got my associates, Pellissippi, what we're talking about,
right,
to bring the listener up to speed. It's not like it's UT or... I'm not crapping on that. I'm saying when it's a community college, there seems to be a little bit more of a balance.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
At community college, 100%. At more traditional universities, or even... So I just came from a private university, a private Christian university nonetheless. And all of them, with the exception of maybe 5 people that I taught personally, all of them were young, fresh, out of high school, there for scholarships for sports, and it was a whole nother, it was an experience. But at community college, it definitely is more diverse, in age, in race to a degree, depending upon the campus, I've had a couple of queer students, which has been great. But yeah, the age is, I personally love non-traditional students. And it took me a while to get to that point, because when I was still in my master's program, I was teaching as a teaching associate, and I had a couple of students who were older than me. And this is baby Katy. I was like 22 in the classroom, and I had students who were, 32. And so it was really weird to be like, okay, I'm like way younger than you, but I'm teaching you. Right. And so it took a minute to get used to that, but I'm at the point now where, I'm just shy of 30, and I have all this experience. I have the doctor in front of my name now. So that gives me more credibility in the classroom. But I really appreciate my non-traditional students, because they help me stay humble in the way that I approach my classroom. Because it used to be that I had a very narrow awareness of what demographic students are in when they enter in my classroom, and so I would cater to that in terms of, okay, well, they're all recent high school graduates, they're all super young, and eventually I realized that I had to start expanding the way that I talked about my students, especially in the classroom, or when I talk to them. It's like, well, most of us are of this generation, or some of you might remember, oh my gosh, I've made references in the classroom, and I've had so many students be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like a Rolodex.
I just made a PCU reference, for God's sake. Yeah. Oh God, a Rolodex. Yeah.
But yeah, they don't know what that is. Or I mentioned the dance move, the Charlie Brown. Yeah. Which is in the Cha-Cha slide, which is
still relevant. Yeah.
Didn't have a clue what Charlie Brown was.
Oh my God.
I was like, you guys, I can't.
Yeah.
It's only going to get worse. I know that. But,
I always blow kids' minds when I say there were only 2 computers in my entire high school.
Yeah. Yep.
pre-cell phones, pre-smartphones. It's like, oh yeah, we only had 2 computers.
Yep.
That's how I'm in the industry I'm in. And they're
Mhm.
like, wait, but you only had, I was like, yeah, 2
Mhm.
computers, dum-dums. Yeah.
Yep. I've had students, a lot of students like to pick topics to do with social media and cell phones and how it's kind of taking away from our interpersonal communication, talking face to face. And I had a student give a speech recently on social media or technology in children. And she gave a statistic. She found one that I'm going to get it wrong, but it was somewhere in the ballpark of 49% of 5 to 12-year-olds have a cell phone, have a smartphone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you serious?
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, the only reason I got a cell phone at 15 was because I had a job.
Yeah.
And if I hadn't had a job, I would have had to wait until I was 16 with a license.
Yeah.
And they're kids these days. If my niece, I know,
Get off my lawn.
kids these days. If my niece and my nephew, if they end up, I'm gonna kill my brother. He best not.
This is a warning. This is shot across the deck. Like, brother, I know you're listening. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah. It's weird though, because my former boss, she was like, she tried to wait as long as she could with her 2 boys, but she said it hit a point to where it was her youngest boy was getting picked on so much that's why she finally broke and gave him one.
Yeah.
Because everybody else was like, I have one, why don't you have one? But he also, I think, went to very wealthy school. So
Well, kids are assholes.
I know.
So
this is going to be a weird question. Have you ever run into any problems with the older students respecting you? Because the reason why I think about that, because when I was in school, there were a few students that were the same age as the professor, and they were in their 40s or 50s, and they would call, like, Mr. Gilbert. It's all these years later. I still call him Mr. Gilbert. He told me recently I can start referring to him as David. And I was like, no, I can't. I can't even refer to you as Gilbert. You like, because that was a point of contention. There were people who would be very like David or something like that. And he did not like that. And I've even corrected some of my friends being like, nope, we don't call him David. We call him Mr. Gilbert. He's
Right.
Mr. Gilbert.
2 things there.
Yeah.
Short answer is yes. I have run into issues. But the second thing, and I'll come back to the first, but the second thing is that I allowed my students to choose what they called me within reason. And especially in grad school, I let my kids call me Katy.
Is your mom going to listen to this?
I don't know, maybe if I tell
I
her.
was going to say something bad, like, hey, dum-dum. There, I'll say that instead of what else I was going to say.
Oh, she doesn't care.
No, within reason. My initial thought was, hey, okay, cool, I'm going to call you fuck.
Well, yeah, that's why I
Sorry,
said within reason,
sorry,
within
sorry.
reason.
No, but that's immediate. Within reason. Like, no, that's all. Or you can go, wait, that's actually kind of creative. You can go. I'm just
no. So,
Sorry.
I tell them as long as it's not, hey, you. But yeah, while I was, in the process of getting my PhD so that they could call me Dr. Ross, or I'm going to prefer Dr. K because it's a little bit more casual and informal, but still gives me the, the appropriate title that I've worked hard for, which then comes, into play the whole gender and sex aspect of, well, I'm a female born person and, women typically have less respect, especially in academia. And there's just a whole long laundry list of things. But I had my students call me Katy if they felt comfortable. Miss Ross was fine. My one shtick was just don't call me Miss Katy because I'm not a kindergarten teacher. I'm a college instructor.
Although I know a lot of that's also a Southern thing. Like
Perhaps.
I went to a Wesley House, which is a nonprofit here, and they referred to a lot of the older women like as Miss Lorraine or like it was just dripping with Southern, like dripping with some. See, I would want to go funny and be like, okay, I'm gonna call you Betsy. I'm gonna go for another Ross,
Sure,
or Thunderbolt, which is from the Hulk. Because it's
it.
General Ross.
Yeah.
It's Thunderbolt Ross. I was like, I would probably go so obtuse. They'd be like, what in the hell?
I would take it. I encourage creativity in my classroom. So if you want to come up with a creative name that's somewhat relevant to what I am, then that's fine. But moving forward, I feel like a feminist responsibility to require my students to call me Dr. something.
Yeah.
My favorite name that I had my students call me was Prof K.
Prof K.
Prof K. And
Sounds like
it,
a rapper.
It rolls off the tongue. It's like, I mean, and like just this last year, students would, they would walk down and they'd see me. They'd be like, "Hey, Prof K." I'm like, "Hey, what's up?"
That's awesome.
Dr. K it just doesn't have the same. So I wrestled with that a lot in terms of, going into this fall semester, if I want my students to call me Dr. K or Prof K.
Yeah.
I landed on Dr. K again because the feminist responsibility, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I might change it. But they're not going to call me Katy.
Yeah.
So coming back to the first bit of that, I had a student who, I've had several students who I've tussled with.
Yeah.
In terms of respect. I've had reviews, at the end of the semester, they, say how they liked or disliked the class or me. And I make my students do something called power poses. Amy Cuddy, TED Talk. It's fantastic. But she talks about how our physical positions help increase or decrease our confidence.
Okay.
And so you do high power poses, like the Wonder Woman is the most notorious one.
Okay.
With the tall back and hands on the hips and things. I make them do that before they give their speeches every speech day. And I had one student who said, "I don't understand why she makes us do this yoga crap. It doesn't have anything to do with speaking." And
Yoga
it's like,
crap.
Right, because we're doing poses.
Oh, good Lord.
I know. But I've had students challenge me a lot in the classroom. And just, I try to see it as them kind of pick playing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, you're going to challenge me. I'm going to challenge you back because you're not going to walk all over me because this is my classroom.
Yeah.
And, we're both going to learn in this situation.
Right.
And that's something I tell my students on the first day of class is like, just because I'm the teacher and I'm at the front of the classroom, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to learn from you.
Right.
I also show them Kid President's message to teachers and students everywhere, and that gets them going. I love Kid President. I have his book.
Although you're probably hitting an age where some of them don't even know who Kid President is,
so
which is
sad.
wild.
Well, he's probably, he's probably 18 now.
I was going to say he's got to be a teenager.
He has to be a teenager.
Nashville.
Is that where he is?
He's from Nashville.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the guy who filmed, because I watched a behind the scenes kind of thing.
His brother-in-law. Right?
Is Nashville.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. I bought his book, a guide on how to be awesome or something.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love it. But I mean, regardless of whether or not they know Kid President, it's still a relevant. It's a relevant video that I enjoy showing them. But yeah, I mean, in terms of older students, I've run into some issues, but more often than not, I mean, I can't speak to how they see me. They're there to learn, and that's what I love about them. That's what I love about community college in general, is that a majority of the students are either coming back to school or they're starting it for the first time at an older age, and they're excited. They're nervous, right, because they know they're older. I tell this story all the time. I had a student who was, or it still is, in her 60s, and she was the oldest one in the class by maybe 3 times. And she made a comment about how she was so nervous because she was the grandma of the class and she didn't fit in. And immediately everyone in the classroom came up to bat and they were like, "No, you are an amazing human. You're going back to school in your 60s. That's something that most people in this world cannot say. So you need to be proud of yourself.
Yeah.
You're part of this class. You're part of this family.
That's
We're going to
awesome.
move forward and you're going to be amazing."
That's
and like
awesome.
my little teacher heart just like warmed in all the right places. I was like, "Oh my God, you guys, I can't." But her confidence definitely grew in the class. And I was fortunate enough to see her a year plus later. And I was on campus coming out of my second interview for the job that I'm starting in the fall. And she said, "Is that Katy Ross?" And I said, "Well, hey, Barbara." And Barbara. And she's really sweet. And she ended up telling me about how she was still friends with some of the people in the class. And she's like, "You can probably already tell that my confidence is so much better and stronger. And I actually talk to people now." since your class. And she's like, I'm actually, I'm looking into getting my bachelor's after this. And then I'm considering going on for my master's. And I wouldn't have done that, had I not taken your class.
That's amazing.
And then something else she said, yeah, we've heard a lot of other people complain about their public speaking classes. And, me and Monica always say, oh, well, you just didn't have it with Katy Ross.
Nice.
So it's nice to have those moments to kind of come back and be like, okay, people learn things in my classroom and they're flourishing.
Yeah.
Just no matter the age.
Right. Do you ever throw them curveballs during the thing? Like not fling rubber duckies at them, but kind of, no.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Like throw curveballs at them, like in the middle of their speech, maybe make them switch or do something.
Oh God, no.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm very sensitive to communication apprehension or speaking anxiety, as we call it, because it's number one.
I needed you at Code Stock when I got. That's the reason why I asked, because I was curious if you kind of push them a little bit to learn how to adapt, I guess.
Yeah, in some ways, but probably not as much as others.
That's more what the improv speech is.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's that in and of itself. It is its own entity of anxiety. It's going to push some people to their limits, and it's going to release other people, like I was saying before. But no, I don't. In the middle of their speech, I am sitting in the audience. I'm smiling. I'm nodding. I'm giving as much eye contact as possible. Meanwhile, I'm like writing all these comments on their rubric because I give that to them so that they have feedback to improve upon. But I've had a lot of students say that, if nothing else, they always look at me because they know that I'm going to be their cheerleader. And that's my purpose.
Do you give points off if they don't look at the audience as much?
Yes.
Damn it.
Yeah.
I kind of float a little bit because I have a hard time sometimes not getting distracted.
Yeah. Well, I give tips, right?
Yeah.
So I understand if making eye contact is very uncomfortable. Some people just cannot for the life of them do it. I'm an eye contact person because obviously communication studies.
Right.
I study how people communicate and the most effective communication. So I try to mirror that. But I tell them, if eye contact makes you super uncomfortable, here's a couple of tips. You want to start at the forehead, right between the eyebrows. And, you can, and you don't have to sit and stare at somebody, which I've had students do. They sit and stare at me only, and they look at me the entire speech, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so uncomfortable.
You're going to murder me.
So start between the eyebrows. If that's still too close to the eyes, go to the forehead. If that's still too close, go to the top of the head.
Not like the tip of the nose?
I don't do the tip of the nose. No, I haven't heard that one.
Because they have levels.
Exactly.
Okay.
They have levels. So eyebrows, forehead, tip of the head, or top of the head. And then if that's still too much for you, make an invisible line in the room and cut the room in half. Mm-hmm. And then just follow that horizontal line.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
Where it's almost like looking right above their heads.
Exactly. Because you can't tell the difference.
I think it's more when I'm listening, I maintain eye contact. But when I talk, I have a hard time not. Because it's almost like I'm trying to find the word. It's almost like I'm building the road as I'm driving on it. Like I'm trying to find the words.
That's common, but that's why we plan our speeches before we give them.
Yeah. Okay. Whereas this is just bullshit. And so I'm staring at the window. I'm looking at, I'm wondering, because in my brain, I'm like, is it too cold in here? Why does my AC keep kicking on?
But your AC, it works.
I know. Thank
so
God.
well. After 8 weeks, 9 weeks.
8 weeks.
8 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I need to get my KUB bill to be like, do I need to bump it up? Or is it so efficient that I'm like, fuck it, it'll just be cold in here. And I'm good with it being cold in here. I'm going to ask a question, but then I'm going to tell you a little side story. Going back to Tom Segura. Do you coach your students if they crash and burn? Like, there's a... Tom Segura, who I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. So I hate speaking in front of crowds. I fucking hate it. Mm-hmm. But I force myself to do it to get out of my comfort zone. Mm-hmm. And all the times except for one, it's been good. The one time was at Code Stock this year where I'm giving a speech. It's a smaller group and no one is into it.
Yeah.
To the point to where 2 people actually got up and left. Wow. And the name of my speech was... while working with UX folks isn't scary, even though I may be. That sets a tone. I don't think anybody in there got the tone.
Yeah.
Because some of them were like, so you're going to teach us about UX? I'm like, no, it's about working with people. Like, that's the entire, you dumbasses. Like,
Was it a workshop or a speech?
it was a speech.
Okay.
It was not. And then halfway through, there was a person who ran that room for Codestock. Halfway through, I did not put a mic on because they did not have, a handheld mic. They had one of those Tony Robbins mics.
Lapels, yeah.
It did not fit over my ear.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't fight. And they had it turned on to where every time I touched it, and so halfway through the speech, the woman came up and she was like, I'm going to need you to talk into the microphone. I was like, they can all hear me. And I pointed to the guy in the corner. I was like, can you hear me? Because I knew him.
Yeah.
David. And he was like, yeah, I can hear you fine. I was like, he can hear me. I'm not talking into a mic. And she was like, no, you have to. I had to hold it. And every millimeter I moved, I burned. It was awful.
Technology is, I would say, next to fear, anxiety, is the number one issue that always goes wrong. So if technology is involved, something's going to fuck up.
But for the most part, they've gone well. The whole reason I was getting this is the first time I gave a Pachakacha speech, it was in between two jobs, so I had time. I laid down on the couch. I was like, I have time. I'm going to take a nap. I'm more relaxed. That's what I used to do for like football. I would take a nap and listen to music because we had hours between school. So I ended up popping on. I was like, I'm going to pop on this comedy special. This is Tom Segura. First part of it, I need to memorize this because it's a great topic. He's like, people ask me about my job and they say, that scares the hell out of me. Getting up and talking for an audience, he's like, it's an hour out of my day. If it sucks, then it's like, how was your day? Well, that 1 hour sucked, but the rest of it was fine. There's 23 other hours in the day. And that clicked in my brain. I was like, I'm speaking tonight. It's 6.5 minutes because I was scared. I was like, if it sucks, it was 6.5 minutes. This was a good day.
Yep.
So fuck it.
Right.
And I destroyed that night. Like, I was the only one that made people laugh.
Yeah.
That's a big thing for me is I want people to laugh. I want people to enjoy it. Because far too much, it's just like, oh, my God, they're just dumping information
It can
at
get boring.
me. So
for
I
sure.
try to make it funny to the point to where at the end of it, I almost grabbed the mic and flung it, dropped the mic because I was so like, and I walked off and I was just like, there were even some jokes. I was like, I actually turned and I was like, wow, you all got that one. Awesome. Like it just kept moving on.
Yeah.
And even had one at a different Pachakacha. I asked if anybody knew who Chael Sonnen was, who's a UFC fighter. It was like, nobody. And I was like, Chael Sonnen, UFC? Nobody. Awesome. This is going to go great. And then I went into the Chael Sonnen part of it. Like, I was like, oh my God. But except for Codestock, because I just look at it as like, if this sucks, I don't care. And I had to give one recently at the KEC to where I was like, at the last minute, they were like, oh, yeah, you got to talk for 10 minutes. Fuck. Okay. So I went to my normal spiel and then added 5 takeaways and just, I gave a 6th too. I gave them a bonus because there's a rapper quote. And I was like, I'm going to end on a rapper quote.
Yeah.
But I always try to put people at ease. When I started, I was right next to I didn't know how I was going to start. The improv part, there's a pole right next to me. And I got up and I was like, because 2 other people, we weren't supposed to stand, but they stood. It's like, awesome. So I was like, what am I going to do to make people laugh and like me? Because that's the whole point. I stood up, I looked at the poll and I went, guys, if you don't mind, I'm going to forego my speech and I'm just going to show you what I've been learning at the pole dancing classes in the old city. Everybody laughed.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, I got him. And I just moved on from there.
Right.
I had some people go, I hoped you actually did that. I was like, hell no. I'm bring this whole damn building down. Are you high? Like,
the
no.
secrets I know, Jody.
But it's, I think about that a lot. That's why I was kind of asking about the curveballs is I think about like, oh yeah, if this sucks, it was just 6.5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really, I'll definitely use
but
that.
you also don't want to set them up to be like, okay, well, if it sucks, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
So do you kind of console people if they bomb, or do you worry about not putting too much weight on it because it's still school? You still got to meet metrics.
Yeah, there's still grades and metrics and things, and and all of that. I kind of do a little bit of both, I'd say. So like I've had students, so the way you talk about bombing a speech is a little different than what I've experienced in the classroom.
Listen to comedians. I think that's what it is.
Of course.
You're killing or you're bombing.
Yeah. I've had a lot of students who, I've had students who have cried so hard that they couldn't talk anymore.
Oh, geez.
I've had students who have lost their breath and couldn't gain it back,
or coughed or something.
Yep. I've had students who essentially it comes down to the anxiety about it. Some students, if they, they just stop and they look at me with like frightened rabbit, eyes, and they're just like, they get stuck. That's just a common thing. It's that typical stage fright situation. I'll tell them, okay, it's fine. Just stop, take a breath, collect your thoughts, look at your cards, and keep going.
Yeah.
Right. And usually, I'll forgive the time or, whatever the case ends up being, because the way that speeches work, especially in a classroom, is I have anywhere from 20 to 30 students who have to give a speech in 1 week.
Yeah.
And so, we have a certain amount of time that we can do that. And so if, I've had people not show up for speeches, which is just more infuriating than if they let me know that they can't be there.
Yeah.
They just don't show. And then they show up the next time. They're like, okay, I'm here to give my speech. I'm like, no, you missed your time. So I have some students who, they just freak out, and it's like, okay, it's fine. And I've had students where they run out the door. They start their speech, they mess up, and then they run out. And it's like, okay. I've had students who have told me, that, of course, this was later after they had actually given their speech, but they told me, oh yeah, I totally threw up in the bathroom before coming into class.
Wow.
I
get it.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
So when you schedule out that week, do you have like backups? Like, in case these 3 people don't show up, I told these 3 people to be prepared to talk that day.
I create a speaking order.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So it's just however we get through. Gotcha.
Yep. I create a speaking order, and I make it in advance. Usually I give it to my students so that they have an idea of what day they'll speak on, but all the materials are due on day 1.
Okay.
Right. So that the fairness aspect is still there. But I've had classes, especially at this last place that I was at, where they would see the list and they would know that other days were coming. So they just wouldn't show up on the day that they were told to show up. And then they would come on the next day and be like, okay, well, I'm ready. I'm like, no.
Oh.
That's not like there's a speaking order for a reason. You can't just change your number.
And do you have to fuss at them like you need to come on the days you're not speaking to support the other people?
They're required to, and if they don't, they get points taken off their own speech.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I have found many creative ways around their ways of trying to loophole the whole class and the whole system. It doesn't fly. Oh yeah.
Shortcuts? No.
Yeah, so usually, I'll so like say we have 24 students. That's typical. And then we either meet on 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And so I'll say, okay, well, and if we meet 3 days a week, then we might get through like 7 in one day. But everyone has to come prepared to speak on the first day, because shit happens. I've had students who are like, okay, well, I got in a car wreck, or I'm really sick, or I have to go to the doctor, or something. Yeah.
Older
just
students.
Numerous situations. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So then what that means is that if they're at, like, say, the top of the list, then they get moved and everyone else gets bumped up. And so then some people are like, well, wait, I was like 15 on the list, but now I'm 8.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's because other stuff has happened. So I emphasize you have to come prepared on the first day. And regardless of where you are in the speaking order, you need to be prepared to speak on that day. The speaking order is a privilege and a courtesy. So I've had students, because they, would take it upon themselves to change their order without telling me. I ended up stopped giving them the speaking order in advance. It's like, okay, well, your privileges have been revoked.
Yep.
So you just got to show up.
Yep.
And then you'll find out when you speak. Period.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah. Okay. I find that teaching, it's very enjoyable and I have a lot of positives from it. But it's very difficult to not get sour towards my students and not get so bitter and angry that my class becomes hard. I mean, it's not easy by any means, but I like to think that it's hard to fail my class because I tend to be very forgiving.
Okay.
And, like I want to work with you. I want to see you succeed, but I need you to meet me halfway so that can happen.
Right. When I graduated high school, between like the ages of 18 and 25, I got 6 different offers to teach print shop in high school. And I didn't take them because I knew the kids didn't want to be there for the most part. I was like, well, I would love to teach in college, but I can't teach high school because they got to want to be there.
Right.
And that's a big, like if I had my druthers, I would love to, when it came time to retire, to go back and teach college kids graphic design. Don't know that I'm going to go through all the work because God knows by the time I get there, I'm probably going to have 3 PhDs to teach graphic design. It's like, oh no, I've only been doing it 50 years, but yeah. But I can't, I think that's probably a struggle with the younger students because a lot of the kids at Pellissippi, when I went there, were kids who went to UT for 2 years. They got drunk and partied.
Yeah.
And they were going to Pellissippi because they knew they were having to reset.
Yep.
So you had some of them that were like 21, 22.
I've had
They're
those.
like, oh yeah, we had to reset and then take a year off to pay for this shit because my parents are like, we're not paying for this shit.
Yep.
Yep. Which was good. I think that was a good experience in going to a community college to see those. Like, there was one woman that I was in the design program with that was like, oh, she has to balance everything. Like, she has a job that she had to be like, had to adjust her schedule to be able to come to class 3 days a week. Like, it was crazy.
I just had a student this morning who had to make up her speech from last week because half an hour before our planned session with the rest of the class last week, her husband got in a car wreck, and she has 3 kids, and she just had one 2 months ago.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And so she had to rally all the kids up, most of which are sick. And she had to go get her husband and then figure out that situation. And so she, funny enough, gave her speech on on-campus childcare. And she gave her speech with her 2-month-old in her arms.
That's amazing.
Breastfed while on the call because the child was screaming hungry.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and not only that, but I had another student who had a baby. This was 2 weeks ago. And a week later, she was sitting on her couch with her child in her hands giving a speech. Yeah. Because what else are you going to do? You can't put the infant down because it's a potato.
Then you're going to be distracted.
Yeah. And so like they're having to work through these distractions of having children. And, it's insane. I actually had a student who, it was his 3rd time taking this class online with me, because he had bouts of mental illness and he has a young family. He's young himself. He's like 20 maybe. And he has a 2-year-old. And so, he ended up chatting with me and he was just like, I just really want to thank you for how understanding you've been because, I have a lot of life going on. It's like, well, yeah, absolutely. Life happens. We're adults. Classes and education is not the only thing going on in your life.
No. I meant to say this earlier when we were talking TED Talks, but there's a great one. Do you ever show them speeches as like examples of like here? There's one that I think would be good on setting expectations, and it's Malcolm Gladwell talking about David and Goliath.
Ooh, okay.
It's a great speech.
Okay.
Or a talk.
Yeah.
But it's about setting expectations. He essentially tells you why Goliath was the underdog. It's really good. Not to spoil it, but it's really good.
Yeah, I'll look into it. Okay. David and Goliath TED Talk.
And there's part of me that wants... Have you seen the Vanity Fair videos on YouTube where they bring in an expert to rip on movies, like a stunt person, or they have a newer one that's a woman from the CIA ripping on how the intelligence... I want to do one with you ripping on how people give speeches or talk or stuff like that. Because I'm curious how you feel about somebody like Kevin Smith. Like when he talks, like, do you cringe at a lot of people, seeing a lot of people give speeches?
I try to separate myself from like teacher mode and personal mode, but it doesn't always work that well. So I do have one story in regards to really bad speeches. So a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, he recently finished his PhD also in communication studies. He's in New York, and we got our master's together in Texas. And so we took, each of the 2 years that we were there, we took a week-long trip, and we went out west, and we just traveled to like the Four Corner states. Well, we were at a national park, and for the life of me, I'm not going to remember which one it was, but we went to all of them. And there was a tour guide. And so we were going through the whole thing, and we both teaching public speaking.
Oh God.
Oh my gosh. We couldn't help but be like, I really just want to give her like a rubric to follow. 'Cause she was all over the place, and she was like, she didn't have a whole lot of social awareness. So she would tell a joke, no one would laugh, but she'd laugh at herself. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but she kept doing it. Eesh. And it was painful.
You need to find new material.
It was very, very painful. And I mean, as a tour guide, I mean, I've been a tour guide in college, so I get it. Like, you know, you use the same stuff all the time. I mean, even teaching, I use a lot of the same examples because they make sense. They go over well. But eventually you have to change it up.
Right.
But yeah, I've definitely seen some speeches where I'm just like, oh God, that's awful.
Okay.
Ugh.
So you're able to, like, if you watch a comedy special, you're able to pull back and be like, I can't.
Yeah, because comedy's different.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of comedians are like, oh, I run that set 500 times.
Right.
So they got it down. What's funny is the people who went a little behind the curtain, they're like, yeah, when we make up something in the moment, for the most part, we're not making up something in the moment. Yep. We made it up one time, and we've done it 300 times since then.
Exactly. It's so rehearsed more often than not, because you have to rehearse that comedy in order to make it seem like it's in the moment.
Yes.
But you really have to work through it.
And also because, like, back in the day when people were shooting specials, or even now, it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Although on the flip side, one of my favorite comedians ever, who is very 100% non-PC, is this guy Patrice O'Neal. It's this larger black man. One of his biggest specials, he improv the first 7 to 8 minutes. He walked out, saw something, and just reacted to it. It was during the Natalie Holloway where the woman got kidnapped. And so his first 7 to 8 minutes were like, he walked out and there was a young white woman, very pretty, down front. And then there was a black guy on the other side. And he's like, man, you go missing? They're going to be looking for your ass. He points over at the dude. He was like, they'll go out to the edge of the water and be like, nah, we don't see him, and go back. Like, but it's the first, but there's still comedians who talk about, they're like, all that time, all that investment, all that, and he still was like, I don't give a shit. Mm-hmm. This is what I do. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And what's funny is I've watched a couple of specials from great comedians who did, their entire special is crowd work. It's painful.
Yeah.
I was like, you need to shoot that like 50 times to get enough material for one good special. Because there was a lot of them, it was just, you didn't mic the audience, so you can't hear what the person's like. It was like painful to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Humor is a special, it is in its own lane.
Yeah.
And I don't discourage necessarily my students from using humor in their speeches because it can go over very well, much like your own experiences.
Yeah.
But it can also go very, very badly. And so I tell them, if you're not naturally prone to humor, maybe don't.
Okay.
But if humor is something that you're naturally a funny person, people tell you that you're funny, you like to kind of laugh and make people laugh, it gives you more confidence, then lean into it.
Okay. Well, and it's wild because there are people like Kevin Smith is one, Henry Rollins is another, where it's still considered spoken word, which seems weird to me because when I hear spoken word, I think of like poetry, jazz poets and shit like that. But it's like, no, it's just they're not stand-up comedians. They just get up there and tell stories.
Okay.
And there is humor in there, but it's also like Henry Rollins, you can go through an entire special of his and laugh 2 times. So there's a lot of comedians that like push back at them of like, you're a spoken word person. And I didn't listen to him forever because I was like, oh, he does poetry. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't want to listen to that shit.
Well, that kind of makes me think of Hannah Gadsby, right? Because she's a comedian.
I still have not watched that special.
Oh my God.
But I think it's the reason is I'm such a comedy nerd. I've heard all the comedians comment on it, and they're like, it's a one-person show. It's not a comedy special.
Well,
like, I think in their rubric, I'm going to use your word.
Yes.
In their rubric, they're like, no, it's a one-person show.
It is. I would. There are laughable moments.
I'm thinking of other things I want to talk about. Sorry.
There are laughable moments in there for sure. But with Nanette on Netflix, if you haven't seen it, you have to go give it a watch.
I know,
Jody, I'm looking at you.
I know.
You're
making eye contact with me.
But it gets on like big topics, you know, and like serious topics, and it makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that's the purpose of it. And so I would see that as kind of like a spoken word storytelling, but also comedic
one-person show. I think they say that because like there's comedian like Mark Maron his was more one-person show because he would rent out, because that used to be a thing. You would rent out a black box theater in New York and do that. I can go into nerddom with you on comedians. Like there's a guy, Christopher Titus, that his is not almost like, because he almost doesn't do clubs. Like he does theaters and everything. He was like, he has it all written from beginning to end, and he'll do a 2-hour show. Like, and he comes here every year, and he always, because he likes Knoxville and his audience is so good here, he's like, I'm going to work out 20 minutes on you, and then I'm going to come back in a year and have that worked out and do it for you properly. Nice. If I can do that. He'll always pause 2/3, 3/4 of the way through the show. He's like, all right, now it's the time. And it's just gotten to a point to where everybody just understands it. And he does it. He did one bit with all the shootings and stuff happening. He did one called Arm the Children. That bit was the most wrong but funniest things I may have heard in my life. Okay. He's like, you know what we have to? We have to arm the children. I just sent Kristen a video where he did one on pedophile crucifixions.
Whoa.
He was like, you know what'll get people back into church? You bring good, pious men of God, like these old school, oh, laddie, and he goes into the Irish accent, and he was like, and you take those people that touch kids and you put them up on the damn cross, and he was like, and you let the kids, he was like, no, laddie, use whatever tool you like. Oh, you got the nail gun. That'll be a good, like, he nailed you, now you're nailing him. Like, it's so wrong. But it's interesting seeing him versus Hannah Gadsby versus Patton Oswalt. Well, no, Patton Oswalt's still almost beginning to end. Bert Kreischer, great example. You know, or Nikki Glazer. Like, people who are like, no, it's weird. It's weird that even in that world there are different styles or different types. Yeah. You know, I think you'd like Titus but his shit is so unbelievably wrong. Like I just told you, pedophile crucifixions and Arm the Children. Like, a lot of his stuff is just he grew up in a very rough household. Like his dad was pretty tough on them and was a drunk and all this stuff. But yeah, his story about his dad dying and what they did after that is so unbelievably wrong, but so funny. Like, I don't know. Finding comedy in pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When is Hannah Gadsby? So you think it's more of, you think it would almost fit a little bit more in the spoken word kind of,
in the way that you're talking about it, because I mean, like the spoken word, as far as I know, it is poetry. Like a very, very good friend of mine, who's also a mentee, just is starting their PhD program this fall, and emphasizes queer spoken word, in terms of like the poetry, like slam poetry kind of situation. Yeah. So I guess that would, I don't know if it's just semantics, but what is the difference between spoken word and slam poetry? Yeah. You know, but I think it depends on who you ask. Yeah. So you use the word semantics. This is a hot button. I'm curious how you feel on this. I think I've said this before. I may get raked over the coals for anything I say on that, especially the one I wrote down. I was like, oh, this one. I'm curious to hear your take on it, because there are some things. If we can go into the LGBTQ plus. Yeah. There are the discussions we had at Central Flats and Taps with Danny and Kristen. I don't like the term white privilege. Okay. And it's semantics for me, because I
I grew up in the black community, but I also know a lot of very poor white people. And I think for me, it's a marketing and PR standpoint of if you say that they have white privilege, they can't understand that. And I hate to be a dick, but it's also could be because they're undereducated.
Right.
I was like, I wish there was another term. I was like, I understand the sentiment. I wish there was another term because you're just adding flame to the fire. They're like, I'm not privileged. I had to work for it. It's like, I understand.
Yeah.
But semantics.
It is. I totally understand where you're coming from. I would say, so a lot of people, I wouldn't say a lot, maybe, I don't know how many, a percentage of people misunderstand white privilege to they see it as, just like you said, right? Like I'm privileged.
Yeah. I was handed everything in life.
I was handed everything in life, which is not at all what white privilege, as we know it, is about. It's actually just pointing out that white privilege is like the standard. It's like the bottom line, and then everyone else who's not white is below that line.
Right.
It's based on it's not that you gained more because you're white.
Yeah.
It's that you didn't lose anything because you're white.
Yeah, there's a musician that said something like you're being white is like being born on third base or something like that. Saying you're ahead.
Yeah.
I think the thing I came up with is if I'm driving down the interstate and I'm speeding, that's my example of white privilege. I don't have to worry about getting shot by a cop.
Well, yeah, that's a more realistic example.
I was like, I can speed and know at the end of it, I'm either going to get put in jail for reckless driving, or I'm going to get a ticket, or I may get off, but I don't have to worry about getting shot by a cop.
Right.
Like that's the best thing, analogy or whatever that is called, real world example.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
To where I give people, I was like, that's what white privilege is. I wish we could find another word. I was like, it's a weird, clunky. Use the term clunky.
Yeah.
It clunks in my brain, and I'm not the white guy from privilege saying we should. I was like, no, I just want to change the word. I wish there was advantage. Yeah. But I think that musician saying you were born on third. I was like, that's fucking brilliant. Like that's a great way to put it.
It is.
See, in that, oh God, damn it. Okay, we're going to come back to the master's and the PhD, but now I'm on a sidetrack.
Okay.
Because I'm curious your thoughts on this. We have a mutual friend, and I think we've talked about this. I know Kristen and I have gone down rabbit holes. I think we had sat in Skybox like 3 weeks ago. went down an hour-long rabbit hole of this. We have a friend that argues with me a lot. I grew up in the black community. She grew up in a very white community, very middle class to some upper class. She and I argued. She said, every woman has it harder than every man. And I essentially said, how dare you? Because if you're a white woman living in Farragut, the analogy I gave was somebody I knew. I was like, her dad is a lawyer. Her husband-to-be is a lawyer. She was born with, maybe this is a white privilege, she was born with a safety net. She never has to worry. She can go for another job. She can do whatever the fuck she wants because she's always going to have a safety net. I was like, you're saying that she has it harder than a black man to a single-parent home with 4 siblings. And she was like, yeah. I was like, you are out of your fucking mind.
Yeah, no.
And I was like, you know how I feel even worse? The single mom that's taking care of the 4 kids. I was like, I feel even worse I was like, you're out of your mind. And then I heard somewhere later, it's like, when it comes to getting a job, they gave the levels, and it was like white man, black man, and it went down. I was like,
but that's looking at it in a one line view, right? It's much more complex than that because if we boil it down to one word, and it's not even boiling because it's significant, intersectionality, right? So like, I can't say.
Obviously, I know what that means, but for the audience.
Right. So intersectionality, it has to do with the fact that all of our identity components contribute to how we are perceived and treated in the world.
Oh, yeah.
So like I can't, if I walk down the street and Chris and I actually just had this conversation. If we're walking down the street and say we're holding hands and someone cat calls us, right? I can't say for certain if that's because I'm holding my partner's hand and we look like lesbians. I can't say if that's because of my gender identity because I'm queer as fuck.
Yeah.
I can't say if that's because I'm a woman,
Yeah.
right? There's no one thing that I can pinpoint and say, oh well, I was catcalled because of this, right? I was going to say percolate. I can, what's the word?
You can.
Oh my God. It's right there. I can speculate.
Yeah.
Not a P.
There's a P in there.
There's a P in there. Yeah.
There's a PER in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Or PE.
Sure.
Sure. I went to Fulton. I can't spell for shit. What are you? I'm not the.
I can,
you can
speculate all day long as to why someone treated me the way that they did. But I won't ever know their true intentions unless I sit down and have a conversation with them, which I'm never going to do because they're an asshole to me.
So I saw two men kiss and I turned away and I thought if anybody saw that, they would think that I'm homophobic, but it's just, I hate PDA.
Yeah.
If it was a guy and a girl kiss, I don't give a shit. Like
right.
I just don't bring that shit out in public. I was thinking about that with somebody I know. I have now bumped into her twice, one at Rhythm and Blooms and one at Pride, that her and her boyfriend were aggressively making out in public. And I was just like, oh, I was like, get away. Like,
I'm happy for you that you're in love, but I don't need to see it.
I don't know if they're in love. They seem to be.
Presumably.
They were also both times incredibly drunk, but I was just like, this is, no, just don't. Okay, intersectionality. Yeah, because everybody brings their own shit. Mm-hmm. I end up having to fight that a lot because I know I have stood in Fulton and go, I know what I look like to you all. I was wearing pants and a nice shirt. I was like, I grew up here, man. I was like, it was a lot rougher than when you all are here. Mm-hmm. It's like I saw a gun on my first day of school. I've had a gun in my face on 3 different occasions.
Yep.
It's like, this, y'all are adorable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so I get that I'm a big goofy white dude, but it's not.
But you have your own experiences that you bring to the table, just like everybody else does. And that's.
So anyway, we were talking on the levels of like for jobs and the person who's like, every woman has it harder than every man. And I was just like, gee, it's not that simple.
No.
And you're not taking wealth inequality or skin color or anything. Mm-hmm. And hell, it's getting to a point now to where if you are, I hate to be so blunt about this, if you are brown right now, whether you're Middle Eastern and fucking idiots are looking at you like you're a terrorist, even though you're not, or you're brown and you're from Mexico, or you're Spanish or Hispanic. And people, I was like, I don't want to say I feel bad for, because I feel like I'm punching down when I say that, but it's just like, y'all have a really hard go at it right now.
Yeah,
because
there's
of
some sympathy.
idiots. Because of fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
mean, I fully recognize, and it's easy to forget this because, you know, we go about our day and our lives, but a lot of people outside of the U.S. see Americans as dumb, like very stupid, and I agree with them. And I know that's an unpopular opinion, but obviously part of it is because of our current president and how much of a dickwad he is.
I'm only going to give him one more year, and then that's a stock. So I ran those through you the other day. I forgot there's a podcast where he did that too, where he's like, now obviously I know, but explain to everybody when you don't know. And he does that. He's like, okay, when people come in there, he's like, okay, so we don't like Ted Nugent's music, but we support his politics. Yeah. We go that dentist in Minneapolis. We love Kim, what's her name, in Kentucky, and we support our president. And everybody's like, what the fuck? But I love that the first time he says, we're going to give him one more year. Yeah. I've heard somebody recently go, we're going to give him 5 more years. I was like, oh, God. I was like, that's so dark and that's so amazing.
No.
Yeah. I understand. But I also worry that, like Chris Hardwick, the comedian, he said anytime he goes outside the States, he apologizes for being American.
Right.
I don't feel like doing that. I feel like going, no, I'm going to show you lead by example, by how I am, that we're not that.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to apologize for being American. I'm going to agree with you that he's an idiot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to apologize either.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like you said, right?
Yeah.
Like acknowledge that the country that I come from has a lot of stupid people.
You know how I have a long term, because I'm from the South, and I'm tired of the South getting shit on.
Yeah.
For being done. Any comedian, Henry Rollins is bad about this. Anytime he does a dumb voice, it's always a Southern voice.
Yeah.
I'm like, dudes who speak that I need subtitles from Alabama sent people to the moon.
Mm-hmm.
Like, stop acting. So that, I think that's where I buck against a little bit, because Chris Harvey was like, I always say, "Je suis American stupide" in French. I was like, stop.
Yeah.
Stop. Just say he's an idiot, and we're not all that.
Right.
Like in the South, like Tennessee is 4 dots of blue with a shit ton of red surrounding it.
Yep.
Like, okay, fuck, what were we? Now I'm lost. I'm usually pretty good at getting back around. The woman has it harder than any man.
Yes.
Like, I really buckled against that, and Jill, the thing I wrote down that I got excited, Jill Soloway, who is Hannah Gadsby's partner.
I didn't know that.
Or they were, I don't know. I listened to her and Larry Wilmore. I've listened to a few interviews with her, and it was good.
With Jill or Hannah?
Jill.
Okay.
The last one I heard with Larry Wilmore, I had to shut it off. Because I was like, you are reeking of rich white person.
Ugh.
It was so bad to where I was like, you need to stop talking. Because you're talking about how you're oppressed, but then in the same breath, you're talking about like buying a BMW or something.
My God.
You know what I mean? It was just
Yeah.
like, you are not reading the room,
Yeah.
but you are not understanding the words that are coming out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I finally had to shut it off. I was I know I can't do this, but I kind of wanted to yell at her and go, you need to check your rich white person shit at the door.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you can't talk about how you're oppressed, and then at the same voice, you're like, oh, and then we flew to Paris and shit. Like, I was like, stop talking. Because there's also part of me that's like, I'm a centrist when it comes to politics.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you're just giving fodder to everybody who hates you. I was like, you're an idiot. It's like, I know you're smart, but you're dumb. Like, you're literally.
I've heard some things about her character that aren't as shining as it's perceived, because I know Jill. I'm familiar with Jill because she created Transparent,
Yeah.
on Amazon Prime, which also caught a lot of slack.
It seems like it didn't up front, but it did like by season 2 or 3.
It did because what's his name?
Jeffrey Tambor.
Jeffrey Tambor. Yeah, he played Moira, the main character. And that's the issue of getting into representation for transgender people, especially in media.
Right.
Is obviously we want to put trans people in the role of trans people because they know the experience to the fullest. But when you're in media and in film trying to portray the transition of somebody,
Right.
it can be very difficult, because if you put a trans person, so for instance, if you look at Orange is the New Black with Laverne Cox,
Yeah.
she has a twin brother.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you watch, I think it's the 2nd or 3rd season where they do the backstory on her. They had the reason they hired her is because they wanted a trans woman who had a twin brother.
For some reason, I thought I saw a photo shoot with her not in. What the fuck? What would you.
Not herself?
Yeah. No makeup, no wig, no. Like none. What do you call that? Like, not herself is the perfect example, but not.
Feminized?
Yes.
Okay.
It looked. In the photo shoot, it was presenting as a man.
So that was probably her brother. Because she...
Oh, what? But I swear I thought it was like a photo shoot in a magazine that it was her.
I don't know. It could be. I don't know. But
Because when you say twin, I was like, wait, no, I swear I've seen her represent as a man. I hate to do air quotes, but you know what
No, I don't think that's possible.
Okay.
Because she's very adamant. She's a woman.
Okay.
And she's probably the most vocal trans woman, nonetheless, of color, that we've seen in the last decade or
Yeah.
even beyond. But yeah, so in the
Okay.
backstory
So
in the
it may have
show,
been the brother.
her
Okay.
brother was the one that came to and acted as Laverne's characters.
Yeah.
I think it's Sophia, maybe. It's been a while. But he was in there.
Okay.
Yes.
I swear, I could be wrong. I'm gonna go research because I swear
Okay.
I swear I saw that.
Yeah, you'll have to let me know.
That's also the okay.
But that's the
Fuck,
trouble.
I was about to make an analogy where I was going to get into trouble.
Ooh, yeah. Stop
Sorry,
yourself there.
because I was about to. I find it fascinating because I know this is not trans. This is drag. That like RuPaul
Mm-hmm.
seems to, the more I see him
Yep.
now,
Yep.
it's as a representing as a man,
Right.
as opposed to in the. It's almost like the drag is for his. Am I saying that right? Drag.
Yeah.
The drag is for his show.
Yeah.
And he is him.
Yeah.
Fuck, I don't.
It's hard. It's
I'm trying to be respectful, and I think it's. I think you said this to me once. You was like, "You have no hate in your heart. I get where you're going.
Yes.
Like, I get where you're going. Like you're just trying to find the words.
Right. Yeah. So, I see where you're unintentionally conflating.
Yeah, and I didn't mean, but I
Yeah.
think it's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
It's apples and oranges. I'm like, it's interesting to me that RuPaul has chosen that route, in that
To present as
no, that it's almost like two lines. Like in the show, in his show,
Mm-hmm.
he wears the drag, but when he's like, he has the show on YouTube where it's him taking someone on to like buy groceries.
Okay.
It's awesome. But outside of the show, he's like, no, I'm represent as a man.
Yeah.
And I'm not equating that to Laverne Cox. I'm saying that's fascinating to me. Like that it's almost like putting on a persona.
A persona, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Persona, performance.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of drag performers, regardless of whether they're men dressing as queens, or women dressing as kings, or
Yeah.
even women dressing as queens. I mean, it's expanded a lot more. We have actually in Knoxville a very thriving what we call bio queen group.
Okay.
And so that's a biological queen. So a woman who, a female born person who dresses and performs as a drag queen. So like Geneva Convention.
No, I'm thinking of Lady Gaga in the beginning of Star is Born.
Lady Gaga.
I like
I
her.
haven't seen that movie.
I have not seen it either, but I watched it on a plane. I did not hear it. I watched it. And it was almost like at a drag show, but she was, can I use the term vamped? Like
Yeah.
overemphasized,
Yeah, absolutely.
overdone.
So I
Vamped.
I recently take issue with Lady Gaga. I just watched the 4th season of American Horror Story.
Oh, yeah.
I got behind because I have a serious phobia of clowns, so I had to skip the
Oh my
Freak
God.
Show season.
Okay.
And then 3 more have since come out, so I skipped that one and I just got back to it. I don't really like her as an actor. I
don't really like her as a person because she feels like she's acting at all times.
I tried to watch her documentary on Netflix,
Yeah.
and I had to stop it because I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, she's so self-indulged."
Yeah.
It made me sick.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That'll bring us around to. Hopefully, I've dug myself out of the hole. I think I'm rolling from one topic to another. So the going from Laverne Cox to
Drag queens.
drag queens was not like
It wasn't a smooth transition.
it wasn't an arrow going from one to the other. It was
Yeah.
like, oh no, now let's talk about this
Just
now.
a hop.
It's all like leapfrogging.
Yeah.
God, I'm curious. My heart is in the right place.
Yes.
And this is one of the things we talked about at Flats and Taps. I struggle with a lot of people because I feel like they just need attention.
Mm-hmm.
And like what we were talking about there was, I was like, I met somebody who's non-binary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to retell the story because it's weird to me
Mm-hmm.
in that, it's weird to be non-binary. I don't give a shit. Do what you do.
Right.
Live your life before you die. That's a quote from a song. Live your life before you die. but I'm 6'7", and that person looked at me and said, "You're 6'7". I was like, "Holy shit, you're the first person to ever get it on the nose."
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, yeah, I get that. And I gave them the card that said, "Yes, I am tall." And then they're like, yeah, I have to fight that against all the time because I'm non-binary. So when people, I was like, nobody looks at you and has to question that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're almost like fishing for, it's like, we're not the same. Please
Right.
say that to a black person.
Yeah.
I want to see you say that to a black person because it's not going to go. But, and I've met a few other people who represent as non-binary, and they've always come off as, I hate to use the term inauthentic, but it's almost like, I feel like you just need to stand on a table in the middle of a restaurant and go, "I need people to pay attention to me."
Some people, certainly.
So, and I wonder if it's an age thing or, because this person was very young. This person was probably 20. This was the Father John Misty. They were probably 22,
Yeah.
23. And it's not weird that they're non-binary. I almost want to stop down and go, why do you need so much attention?
Mm-hmm.
What happened? Why do you need so much attention?
Well, I don't know that. So for some people, right? So I myself am a non-binary queer.
Okay.
Right? Because I don't identify as a woman. I don't identify as a man.
Okay.
But I present very androgynous and very queer, right? So like I don't shave because I don't want to.
Yeah.
But I get manicures monthly because I like pretty beautiful glittery nails. Yeah.
I'm going to the pedicure. I gotta get that shit off because I gotta either do them all. I can't.
Just keep at the rate and it'll grow right out like it almost has. So
it's not growing fast
oh
enough.
my gosh. But anyway,
okay.
so for some people, I would argue myself, right? It's just more of an authentic. This is who I am. Right. Take me or leave me. I don't need to talk about it necessarily. A lot of people don't actually know that I'm non-binary. Yep. And well, I'll say this. A lot of people don't know that I'm queer. Even more people don't know that I'm non-binary.
Okay.
Because it's not something that I necessarily talk about because I don't feel the need to. And a lot of people will look at me and say, "Oh, well, you're a lesbian." And that's when we'll be like, well, actually, I'm queer.
Yeah.
Right. And both gender and sexuality. And so it's only when it's brought up or maybe mistaken that I correct. But for some people, and I think you're onto something with the younger generation.
They're struggling for an identity.
It's struggling for an identity. And the thing is that identity is never stable. And this is something that I found in my research and why I love researching identity is that it's never, one of my favorite quotes about culture and communication is a culture never sits still for its portrait.
That's good.
Right? Because it's always changing. Something's always changing. Something's always happening. And the same thing with your identity. The more experience that you have in love, in life, in family, in education, and
other cultures.
And other cultures, all of it culminates and contributes to how you perceive yourself and therefore how you present yourself.
Right.
To other people, and that is all encompassed in identity. And so, 10 years ago, 10 years ago, I was 19. I was a baby in college, and I was just flourishing in the queer group, the queer club on campus. I had met my first trans person, and my mind was blown. I was dating a trans person, and I identified as a lesbian, and I actually wrote and published a piece about how my identity shifted and how I realized that identifying as a lesbian at that time was something for me to do. Yeah. And not for anybody else to say, "Oh, well, you're a lesbian," because from the outset I looked like I was in a straight couple. Okay. Because I was dating a trans man. And, without knowing, you would look at him as a man. And so I had a life crisis. I was like, whoa, what does this mean? Like,
that's the time to have it. You got to you're figuring shit out.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that continues throughout life, even into every decade and moving forward. For instance, my mom, I don't know if she personally identifies this, but I would identify her as a caretaker because her fiance is an amputee and he's been in the hospital on and off for the last 7 years.
Yeah.
And so she's having to take care of him, right? And that's a certain identity. And I know Kristen could relate, when your partner gets sick, a caretaker is an identity and that ebbs and flows.
That overtakes your entire life.
It does, exactly. Yeah. And this is something else that I found in my research and looking for my dissertation, looking at queer individuals who live in and or are from Appalachia and what it means for their Appalachian identity to be queer and vice versa.
Right.
And so, these things just, they're like fireworks, right? I see, here's another take a drink. I see your identity growing as fireworks. And every now and again, you'll see a firework just pop out and you'll be like, oh, okay, let me grab a couple of that and then a couple of this. It's like you're forever making, here's another one, take a drink. You're forever.
Damn it! I was going to make a Katy Perry joke. I see it as you're on Team Katy, not Team Gaga. Sorry. There. Now we're rolling over. Here you go. Here's your next.
I
one.
see it as you're collecting the ingredients to make your own cake in an easy bake oven.
Right. And I think going back to those non-binary people that I've met, I think it's been, what is it? Causation versus, I don't know what. I think it's because that's all I've been exposed to. There's a lot of it that I just feel like you're just trying to be unique.
Yeah.
You're just a boring ass person. And you're not old enough to understand you can just be a boring ass person.
Yeah.
You don't have to stand out in the crowd. If you want to stand out in the crowd, figure out something to stand out. Does that make sense? I feel like it's most of the people are, because we live in the age of social media where everything is selfies, to where it's like, I need to be unique in some way.
Social media has definitely dampered identity as we know it.
But it's also like, in that vein, it's always been that way, but it's never been as
public,
had a spotlight on it. Because when I was in high school, there were gay people in the high school, lesbian, gay men. Some of the cheerleaders decided to be lesbian for a little while just to see, because they were figuring shit out. But in the long term, they did not.
Right.
So
I've dated those.
The person, I about said dipping their toe in the water, but I feel.
Oh, there's so many euphemisms.
I know.
There.
Good Lord. Good Lord. That's going to be a stronger drink every time we make inappropriate euphemisms. But the non-binary person at the Father John Misty show, I almost want to go, I need to find you in 10 years. Because I want to see if you're this full of piss and vinegar about this thing as you. Is this who you are, or is this a way for you to be unique?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. Like, I'm the sociologist in my mind is fascinated by that. Like,
yeah, so I've struggled with this within the queer community because there are people who, regardless of age, are kind of stuck in the party phase, right? Yeah. And they're all about going to dance parties and clubs, which I have no problem with. That's not me. That's not where I am anymore. I did that in college, and then I'm done with it, and so there are people who need the attention.
Right.
And so this is what it boils down to for me. And this is a question that I've constantly asked in the last many, many, many years. And I still haven't quite come to an answer. And I don't know that I ever will. I don't know that I want to necessarily.
Or maybe there is no answer.
Yeah. But the question comes down to the struggle between the queer community wanting acceptance from everybody else, while at the same time being recognized as their own individual uniqueness, if you will, right? So like the line between being accepted but as the same, but also being recognized as different.
This may be clunky, but I'm rolling with it.
Yeah.
Want to be recognized, but also still maintain minority status.
Yes, exactly. Like, I mean, perhaps
because
that could be...
technically you still will be, like, for the most, well, God knows what it's going to be in 50 years.
Sure.
Could switch over to the majority, whatever, but but still want to maintain that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I get what you're saying.
Yep. And it could transpose onto, you know, other things like, I mean, I don't know if it would fit on racial minority, right? Like still being recognized as a minority, but also being, yeah, I guess that would work too. But I mean, anything.
Hispanic, Latino
Yeah.
people are still recognized as, hell, women are still recognized as a minority, even though it's 54%?
Yeah, exactly. So like that line is just so blurred for me. And you know, cause there's a lot of argument about people in the queer community and, oh, well, they're just so loud and they shove their queerness down my throat. And there was just recently issues about pride parades and how at pride parades, you know, there are people who dress in, well, almost nothing. And, you know,
Wait, this may have been the point I brought up because I was
perhaps,
like, man, there are a lot of straight white women that seem to be, this is their excuse to not wear any clothes.
Yes.
And of course, I think I made my stock joke where I leaned in and was like, not that I have any problem. There, I even did the Southern accent.
You did.
Like, not that I have any. Dumbass, knuckle dragging idiot.
Yeah. So, but there's that cross point of, you know, people who are what we'll call loud and proud.
Right.
Right. And then people who are, okay. So maybe this is how I see it. There are people who are queer first, and then there are people who happen to be queer.
Right. That's not their entire identity.
Exactly.
So here's, okay, I'm going to go down another sketchy.
Do it.
Please. Do you feel like in that community, or maybe there's not, do you try, I'm going to just say what I'm going to say, and we're going to figure it out together.
No hate in your heart.
Because this is something I've been thinking about for probably about 6 months. Are there people that try and keep people in check in the LGBTQ community? The too loud or too, like, think about, like, I have an analogy that may be an awful analogy.
Still worth a drink.
Yep. A problem I have with the police community is that when you have these police officers that murder black men, you never have a police officer come out and say, some of us are shitty. Some of us don't deserve to be here. I've not heard that once, and it really bothers me.
Yep.
Because police officers are still people.
Right.
And they're shitty people. I've known plenty of people that I grew up with that are police officers because they need to be in power. And that's the only way they do it. And I don't know why that came to me, but it was just like, I'm curious, or I wonder if, I hate to call it checks and balances, but somebody speaking out, it's almost like the left and Antifa. Like Antifa is not really the left, but people on the right or people in the middle don't understand that Antifa is not. Antifa, I heard that, I think, on Rogan's podcast where he was like, they are communist anarchists. They just want to see it all explode. Yeah. Like, and I'm curious if, do you think that's something that will have to be striven towards? Does that make sense? It does, yeah. So almost like, I mean, for lack of a better word, people who police others. Right. And kind of guide them in a certain direction. Right. Or to analogy, that person who at the Father, I hate to keep coming to that person. Yeah. Of being like, almost like somebody from the queer community coming by and go, you got to calm the hell down. Like, you got to. Yeah, you also don't want to tell people how to live. Exactly. Maybe that's the struggle. Maybe that is a bad analogy, but I don't know. It was the first one that came to mind. But like, no, that's the struggle of it, is that in the queer community specifically, one of the most overarching mantras is be you, do you. Yeah. Right? Okay. And so, like, whatever that means, just live your truth and live it honestly and confidently. And so to the point that, you know, someone goes, well, you're not living authentically. I think you should probably change. Yeah, that's true. Right? Like, that's, I mean, who are you to say? What's your place? Damn it. I can't pull it. It was something you said earlier about being an expert in your field. Damn it. When you wrote papers and wrote articles. Credibility. Yeah. Damn it. Yeah. Where's your credibility? Sorry, I was trying to pull it back. No, it's totally true though, you know? And so I think that within the queer community,
in my personal opinion, just, being someone who, yes, queer is a major part of my identity, but it's not all that I am.
Right.
So like I'm a person who happens to be heavily queer.
Right.
But seeing others who kind of adopt the identity because it's a thing to do or
Right.
because it's cool.
On trend.
Yeah, it's on trend.
Yeah.
Right. I disagree with that. And I can't get on board with it because in some ways you're kind of diminishing my authenticity.
Yeah.
By claiming an identity that you don't actually identify with. But on the same token, like, how can I say that you're not being authentic when I don't know your life?
Right.
And so that's the struggle of it is the line between, well, who's being authentic and who's not being authentic.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's part of the struggle that I'm going through with Keep Knox Queer and figuring out, like, well, because it's a private group. And
Right.
so we have to screen everybody. And
Right.
so it's like, okay, well, how do I screen those people? How do I know
Right.
that this person, even though, they appear to be in a hetero couple, they haven't answered the membership questions, they have no friends in the groups that they do belong to don't have anything to do with queerness. How am I supposed to know
You
whether
can't
or
do a
not to let them in?
background check on everybody.
Exactly. And I mean, that's just Facebook alone. I mean, Insta, forget
good
it.
Lord.
And then Meetup even more,
Yeah.
so it's just, it's complicated.
I hate to say it. That's a big reason I did not like Katy Perry from the beginning, because I was like, "What are you doing?" I kissed a girl, and I was like, "You're just trying to be outrageous or something." I was like,
Yeah.
also when she did it, I almost stood up and put my hand up. I was like, "We don't live in that world anymore where that's weird or
Right.
you're cool for doing that." Like, no, you're an idiot. Like,
Yeah. I mean, that
We're-
song in particular could be taken many ways, but
and also you go back to Jill Sobel's "I Kissed a Girl," which is from like 1998 or 97. I was like, no, that's an authentic representation versus an inauthentic representation. The two of them, same title, same song title.
well, it's just, I mean, again, it comes back to identity,
Right.
right? And how sexuality and gender and I mean, almost anything else is fluid, right? And so I'm trying to I think in college we called them a 2-shot lesbian. Does that sound? Do you know that? Right? So
No, but I can infer what you mean. Oh,
so
my
you get
God.
2 shots in a girl and she becomes a lesbian, and this is specifically for college.
Right.
And that was a very, very popular thing to do because you're exploring your sexuality and you're trying
Yeah.
to figure out who you like and what you like and, who you're comfortable with and who you want to get busy with and all of those things. And so there's a lot of question marks in the air that you're trying to answer. And so by going down one path, you're seeking an answer and then you realize, oh, nope, okay, go reverse. And then you go down a different path.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of exploration and I can't hate on anyone who's exploring.
So, not to be Saul obsessed, but I think that's funny. I've had some people in the last 5 years go, because of dating and all that shit, they're like, have you ever considered guys? I was like, no, that's not who would you ever do this the other way around?
Yeah.
Would you ever look at a woman and go, well, have you ever considered guys? Because it's like, no, it's not, I'm just, no. Like, it's not my thing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. That's one of those. I was just like, "You're a dumbass." Some have made that in a humorous way.
Sure.
I'm thinking of Kristen and our friend Neil, who was into me apparently. And they're like, if you ever think about it, it's like, no. And
Thanks,
of course,
but no
she was
thanks.
giving me a hard time.
Well, yeah.
But there have been, honestly, people been like, well, you really ought to consider. I was like, no, I'm fucking 40, man. Or if I would have known by now, that's a rabbit hole I cannot get on on the microphone. I think we have talked off mic about that a lot. There is one issue I struggle with that I can't talk about on here because I just can't.
Yeah.
But it's stuff we've talked about off mic, and
Yep.
I think you understand, and you're like, I don't know what to do there.
No, we're good. We're good.
We're good. Now I'm trying. your college, see, I do circle around. Your bachelor's is in communication studies.
Mm-hmm.
What was your master's in?
Communication studies.
Okay. And then after we went through all that, and what is your PhD title, thesis title?
Oh, okay. The degree is in communication studies.
Is it?
I'm comm studies through and through.
I don't know that. I realized. Well, I guess that makes sense because he's getting his in literature.
I mean, some people jump around, and that's totally okay. But I stuck with comm studies. I changed my concentration.
Okay.
So, like in bachelor's, I was interpersonal and organizational communication. Master's, I was health and intercultural communication. And then in PhD, I returned back to, just because they made me go into a certain concentration, I returned back to what they called relating and organizing, which is interpersonal and organizational. Okay. But throughout it all, I have focused on trans and queer communities.
Okay.
So my dissertation title, which is the giant book that I just finished.
Dissertation.
Thesis. Yeah. Thesis is typically with masters.
Okay.
Dissertation is typically with PhD. I know it's a lot. It's a lot to unfold, and I don't expect anyone to understand it. It's complex, and it took me a while to wrap my own head around it. But it's titled "At the Intersection of Queer and Appalachian." So, like the N is in parentheses. At the intersection of queer and Appalachian perceptions of social support. No, hold on. Oh my God, I've said this so many times. The intersection.
I can cut all this out if you. Just kidding.
Oh my God. At the intersection of queer and Appalachian, negotiations of identity and social support.
Okay. Social support. So public support, or like, are you talking about social support like, I hate to say Planned Parenthood versus Friends?
It's part of it. All of
both?
it.
All of it? Okay.
Yeah, so social support, the frame that I used, House 1981, he breaks down social support into 4 specific areas. So there's, hold on, give me a second. There's informational support, instrumental support, esteem, and emotional.
Okay.
And so, like, emotional support is talking your best friend down off a ledge.
Yeah.
Esteem support is boosting someone's ego, saying, you're an amazing human, you're smart, you're beautiful, you is kind, you is important.
Right.
Instrumental support is like giving someone a ride to Planned Parenthood.
Okay.
Informational support is offering or even exchanging information that's helpful to someone's situation that's causing stress or trauma, what have you. So like, for instance, a prime example of that would be a lot of trans people, especially trans men, start video blogs. Okay. And they track through their transition. And so their vlogs would be considered informational support for other people who are considering or even going through their own transition. Okay. Because they gain information to help them through their situation.
It gets better. Like, kind of showing, like, the old story, which is, man's caught in a hole. A priest walks by and he was like, Father, can you help me out of this hole? So he writes a prayer and throws it down in there. A doctor walks by and he says, Doctor, can you help me out? He writes a prescription, throw it in the hole. A friend walks by and he's like, can you help me? And the friend jumps in the hole. And he was like, what are you doing? And he's like, I've been down here before. I know the way out. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know if that's a good analogy, but that's the analogy. That's used in alcoholism.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that totally works. Yeah. So the way I look at social support is through the local aspect, but also the online aspect.
Okay.
Right. So like, does your community support you? Do you feel accepted in your community? Do you have friends or family who support you? And then in the online aspect, where do you find online support? Are you in Facebook groups? Do you follow, certain people? Are you on Tumblr, YouTube? Are there certain media outlets that you use?
Right. Do you have to be private about it, like a private group, versus
Exactly.
you can be public about it?
Exactly. So like one of my participants, a trans guy, a younger trans guy, he primarily found his support online regarding specifically his transness.
Okay.
And that's where he felt he could be the most open and honest, because he knew he was going to get complete honest feedback in return, whereas he doesn't go around every day and being like, oh well, what size needles do you use to inject yourself with testosterone? So like he kept more of his trans identity private in his local aspect, but then let it all out online because there was more of that anonymous component. But a lot of other people found support in their friend groups and their self-created families.
Mm-hmm. Okay, stupid question. How many people did you interview?
I interviewed 20, but I was only able to include 14 of them because my former advisor made the statement that
I've heard all the backstory on this person. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. They were a wonderful human being.
Yeah,
and
it's a fucking lie.
God bless them.
Yeah, no.
But wait.
Go fuck yourself.
Bless her heart. Bless her heart.
Bless her fucking heart. Oh my God.
Sorry, I didn't mean to stir the pot. But you only included 14.
I only included 14 because she said that the 6 outliers were outliers because they didn't technically fit my definition of queer in terms of gender. Okay. And so she was basically saying that they are cisgender. But
can you explain that?
Yeah. So cisgender.
No. I mean, how were they?
Yes. So they hadn't transitioned in any kind of way. So like they were born female, they appeared female, they identified as female. Cisgender.
Okay.
Or they were born male, they appear male, they identify as male.
Gotcha.
Cisgender. Had
your druthers. Had you had your druthers?
Sure. Don't know that one, but yeah, sounds right. Yeah. Had I had my druthers, I would have fought back to include them.
Right.
Because the 6 of them collectively were an older generation.
Oh, okay.
And so their understanding of my call for queer people is very different from everybody else. And so that's a whole nother paper that I'm going to end up writing. But
so I'm going to go down a little side road.
Yes.
We're going. I can't remember if I told you this before or not, but I went to design conference and there was a panel. The 2 people who ran that one tried to make it more of an inclusive instead of it just being a bunch of white dudes. Mm-hmm. So there were 2 panels. One of them was on being black and a designer, and one of them was being in the LGBTQ community. Mm-hmm. I have to clarify that because there were LGBTQ, community. Mm-hmm. I want to make sure I include the T in there because there were 6 or 7 people on that panel. One was a trans. Can I say was to is to get people to understand? Like,
so
was born a man but was transitioning into a woman.
So
she. I will always refer to that as she, but to put it in context.
Absolutely, I like to use the phrase "was born as," right? So was female born or is male born, identifies as a woman.
Okay, gotcha. Also, a black woman, like because this was in Cleveland, and Cleveland is not predominantly black, but it has a strong black community.
It's diverse, yeah.
But it was interesting listen to this panel because one of them was a little bit of an older woman. God, she would shank me if I said older woman, even though I can't remember her. But let's say she was in her 40s.
Okay.
And they went down the line. They were like, what do you identify as? That's how they started. And then she was an older black woman. And then it got about 4 people in, and it was a younger white woman. And the older black woman was like, I'm a lesbian. Yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. Person, get to the younger white woman. She was like, identify as queer. I don't like the word lesbian because it does not, and kind of went off. Ooh. And the older black woman raised her hand and said, I say lesbian because the word queer was thrown at me, and I do not like that word. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh shit, I never thought about that. I was like, yeah, because queer or the F word,
Yep.
FA word, were thrown around so much growing up. Like, that's how I always say, if you don't like gay people, you've never met a gay person in your life. Because it didn't happen until college. I would throw the F word. I grew up in sports.
Yeah.
The FA word. I still throw around the FU word
Right.
often in this podcast. There's another shot. Oh my God, they would be drunk. Me and Tasha said the FU word in this. I'm sorry, Katie's mom.
That is her least favorite word.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. But I was sitting in a class, sociological problems and change class. I'm sitting on one side. There are two guys sitting on the other side. And something comes up and they just start dropping the FA word. They're like, wow, I can't believe those fucking... I was like... And I literally listened to them and went, is that how it sound? That's stupid. I'm not going to do that anymore. That's all it took.
Yep.
That's all it took to stop saying that word. Whereas I was the guy who broke people's faces for saying the N-word.
Yeah.
But it took that moment to go, I'm an idiot. Don't do that ever again. That's what it took. So hearing that on that panel of that woman going, I don't like that word. Because that word was hurled at me when I was a kid.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's still a lot of contention around it, but in the same way that I think a lot of people in the Black community have reclaimed the N-word because that was used as a derogatory term.
Or gone from Black to African American to Black.
Exactly. Yeah. Just kind of changing how we talk about the community. The queer community has reclaimed queer because it's and I'm on the younger end of the generation. And so, I see it as more all encompassing, and it makes it so that there's still some unanswered questions.
Right.
But that's okay.
Right.
And so we're getting used to being comfortable with having unanswered questions. So we're like, when I say I'm queer, and people were like, but what do you mean? So like, who do you sleep with? And I'm like, but it doesn't matter. Right. Because I'm happy, you know, or like when they're like, but do you identify as a woman or a man? It's like, it doesn't matter, you know? And they're like, oh, well, what's in your pants? And I was like, well, that depends on who you are.
You could say, now I can't remember what it was in Spinal Tap, but he had like a pickle wrapped in tinfoil because he was going through the airport and it went off. Because then it could be a guy or a girl. Like,
right.
Because the guy wears it to be like, yeah.
Yep, exactly. So, and that's, I think that's kind of the direction that the queer community is headed, is that your questions, depending upon what they are not always warranted. And that's not to say that they are unwelcome. It's just that in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter if you know what genitals somebody has. And that's, that contributes to the larger conversation of the gender binary, which I could talk for days about, because it's just a fucking mess and it's ridiculous and it serves no one. It serves no one. A male-born masculine person suffers from the gender binary because the gender binary tells them that they cannot be emotional, that they have to be the, big giant man. Exactly.
I'm
Jody.
waving at you because I'm like, when people make fun of driving the Yaris or having my toenails painted, I look at them and go, what more do I need to prove that I'm a man?
Right. Exactly.
Jesus Christ, I'm 6'7". I weigh 2. I'm bald. I have a giant beard.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah. And
I still will not show emotion though, because I am Southern and I'm a Collins man and we don't show them.
Well, sure.
That's ingrained in that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Exactly. but nonetheless, right? Yeah. The gender binary, it doesn't serve anybody. The binary is what has produced toxic masculinity. Yeah. And why we have, in part, of course, but why we have so much issue with, the culture that we live in. And that's not just to say in America, but in the world.
Oh, Jesus.
If you, expand the conversation to
Saudi Arabia,
granted, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, women finally got the right to drive, which is like huge for them. And that's amazing. So there's progress being made, but there are certain places that I would not want to live as who I am.
Right.
I considered joining the Peace Corps for a long time. That was actually my path out of college until I found out that through family positives that I was able to get my master's for free. So I went to Texas and I did that instead.
How long did you have to be in? Was there a requirement like I have to be in it for 3 years or?
No. It had to be.
Okay.
I had to be in Texas. It was through the government, through the military.
Well, I have a friend who got her master's in speech language pathology, and she had two paths. It was she could either, when she got out, she could go in the private sector and she would have to pay back all that money.
Yeah.
Or she could go in the public sector and she would have to still pay it for 10 years.
Yep.
And then 10 years would be forgiven. I was like, 10 years seems like a long damn time to be paying that every month. Like, I feel like if you choose the public sector, you should almost be, it should be the opposite. Like you should be, I don't know. It seems like there's a better way. That's why I was curious if you had to be there for
No, I didn't have that same kind of path. I know what you're talking about though. No, so long story short, my biological father was in the military and became 100% disabled. And so because of that, he had free credits to give to his dependents, which he did.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so I got a stipend for a lot of my college, a monthly stipend that kind of helped me through college.
Yeah.
But then I also got to, like, my tuition was covered as long as I went to school in Texas. So I did. I didn't want to go to Texas, but I did.
Which part of Texas?
I went to Texas Tech University in Lubbock.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm immediately thinking of football program. It's like, man, they are all offense, no defense.
Go Red Redders.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So I was going to go into the Peace Corps, but part of my major concern of doing that was you don't really have any control over where you're going to be placed. And keep in mind, this is at the end of undergraduate. So this is 10 years ago.
Yeah.
8 years ago. But, you know, I wasn't nearly as queer presenting as I am now, but I was definitely not straight. And there are certain countries where, you know, I would definitely not be welcomed.
Right.
So anyways, yeah.
I can't remember what got us down that path.
I don't know.
Damn it. There was something else. I should have written it down that I was going to ask your opinion on.
Oh, we talked about reclaiming words, queer, older generations.
I think I'm past all that.
Okay.
We'll go down this little side. The cost of education. Because that's something I talk to Lance about a lot.
Ugh.
And here's one of the reasons. So, and I think I've told you this before, but I don't know that I've mentioned it on the podcast before. So my buddy and I, Sean, former guest, have a thing where we text each other crazy shit and put #WhyTrumpWon. And it's when stuff is not good enough for people on the left.
Okay.
So a good example, you'll see. So Randy Boyd,
Mm-hmm.
good guy, bad political candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say that shit to his face.
Yep. Horrible
Political candidate, but he also hired the totally wrong people. But him as a human being is a good man.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I worked at PetSafe, he gave $1 million a year of the company's money to either kids' education programs or animal welfare.
Okay.
And I was on that committee to where people would come in and we would give away $1 million a year. And we did not publicize that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I say there's a lot of shit. He's been a big brother forever. He's sunk a lot of money into a lot of underprivileged schools. Like, he's a good person.
Mm-hmm.
So he started the Knox Achieves, which morphed into Tennessee Achieves, to then getting recruited by Haslam to go to the state government and make community college free for any student in the state.
Tennessee Promise,
which then got picked up by nationally.
Yep.
He did that. So now he is interim president at UT, and he's wanting to start a new pilot program where anyone who makes the household income is under $100,000 a year, they get to go to UT for free.
Wow.
That is the correct response. Fuck, I probably can't finish this. Someone I know posted it should be $200,000.
What?
I screen grabbed that, sent that to Sean, and said, hashtag why Trump won.
Yeah.
Because, and I see that a lot. I see that a lot in it's never enough, or you have keyboard warriors who sit at home. There's one person that we refer to a lot because that person comes home, cracks open a bottle of wine, and Facebooks.
Yeah.
On their very expensive MacBook Pro.
Right.
And then closes it and goes to bed and sleeps with a good conscience.
Yep.
I had one of my friends that I don't think they will listen to this. That was thinking about running for county government at the same time that Mayor Kane was running.
Mm-hmm.
Said, I can't do it because he's going to win and I would have to work for him. And ugh. I was like, have you met him? No. Do you know that he does these programs? He started a fucking nonprofit. Like, he's done all these good things. It's like, why don't you like him? Well, because he was a wrestler.
Oh, my God.
Wow. Click. Hashtag why Trump won. Yeah. I was like, so wait, you're saying you don't want to do good for our county because you can't get over the fact that he was a fucking wrestler. It's like, you're an idiot. There was the person who Facebooks, I was talking to them and I was like, you need to run. Oh, no, I can never do that. I was like, then you need to shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
You can either lead or get, quote the poet laureate rapper Jediah, lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what drives me nuts is I think that goes back to the keeping people in check and stuff.
Yep.
I want people to be more honest and open and authentic and be like, no, I grew up in a household that was very black and white.
Mm-hmm.
This is wrong. This is right. You need me to come help you move? If I can do it that day, I'm going to come help you move.
Right.
Because why the fuck wouldn't I?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I still see a lot of things, not through shades of gray, but through black and white. A friend of mine was born a woman, transitioned into a man. I say sir, dude, whatever.
Yep.
All the male nomenclature. And I found out he said to somebody else, I really like Jody because he just looks at me as a guy. I was like, why the fuck wouldn't I?
Yeah.
That's the right thing to do. Who the fuck? Almost be like, who hurt you? I'm gonna kick their ass. It's like, no, that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Like, that's the right thing to do.
If this is who you say you are, then then that's fine. I take that.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of how I approach my friendships too. Like, until you show me a reason to not trust you,
yeah,
I'm gonna trust you 100%. But so in saying that last bit, it reminds me of Dolezal. What's her name?
Rachel Dolezal.
Rachel Dolezal. And she had a documentary out on Netflix a year or two ago, and so like her saying that she's a black woman, do we take that? Right? Because I mean, it gets even more messy. So any conclusion that is drawn is always going to have more spores to explore.
I don't want to have to think about it. Just hold on.
You need to screenshot that.
I should have been drinking. I should have been drinking so I can screenshot that. Well, I think that's because I grew up how I did. Whenever I hear a white person talk black, I want to go, "Hey, that's racist," because you're literally doing a stereotype, and you're an asshole. And stop doing that because you're doing an imitation. I fucking hate Eminem. Eminem is still should not be angry. He's too rich to be angry.
Yeah. He's
still angry. And the fact that everybody lauds him, I was like, he also is doing white blackface because he is trying to speak as a black, what is historically presented as black.
So we call that code switching.
Code switching.
Yep.
That's a really good podcast.
Yeah.
If it's still on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that makes me think, right, and brings up the question, what about black people who speak more, quote unquote, traditionally white?
Carlton.
Right? Carlton. Yeah. Or
God, there's a reference your students may not get.
No, they won't. They won't. Really, really sad. But then, you also think about, what about, kids who are adopted into biracial families.
Yeah.
Right. Or kids who are just raised in families and they adopt the same dialect.
Right.
Right. And it might not be congruent with the color of their skin.
Right. Well, and an example of that is like when I was in high school is when the term African American was on the uptick, and you saw a divide between the middle class black people and lower class black people.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there as a friend of mine who was a middle class black kid said he wore the leather thing with the African map or whatever with the colors. That was a big thing. Sorry, I forgot. That was a thing. Wearing this
Just wearing Africa
garb. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, we got to go back to our heritage and our roots.
Yeah.
And here in the lower class go, man, I'm black. I ain't from fucking Africa.
Yep.
And just kind of going off on the guy. And I was like, this is a class thing right now.
Yes.
That I'm seeing in front of me.
Yeah.
This is not a black or a white or a Hispanic this is a fucking class issue because you have a middle class guy and a lower class guy, and the lower class guy. And I also looked at it, I was like, wait, which one is right? And then later on, it's come up like people hashtag Why Trump Won, referring to Idris Elba as African American. It's like, nope, not from America.
Yeah.
He's from the UK.
Yeah.
That's not African America.
Right.
So I wonder if that being pointed out is why it's swung back around. Or I think it's actually a little bit more of being pro-black.
Yeah.
Like being like, no, this is who we are.
Yeah. Black is beautiful.
Yep. See, we solved all the problems.
Did we? I feel like we just have so many spores.
God, no. I think we're all the way. Yeah, I don't even know at this point. I'm trying to think. Is there anything we have missed that you think I need to... See, okay, here, I'll put it this way. I like talking about this shit because that's the only way I'm going to learn.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes I'm going to fumble and I'm going to be wrong and I can get crucified for that. But it's also like, it's the same thing as I think about like my grandfather or my dad's like, just try and be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Just try and be a good person. And I will say, Sean and I were talking about putting the focus back on you. I was like, I didn't really enjoy marching in the Pride Parade. I was like, I did it one year because it was on my 40 before 40. And I also wanted to be a big, goofy white dude and be like, I'm okay with this. You have a problem with this? Fuck you.
Right.
Like to stand up. The second year I did it because I volunteered with Big Brothers Big Sisters, which was amazing. That an organization like that would stand up and go, no, we're good with this.
Yeah.
Here's a line in the sand. I said, but after that, I don't want the spotlight. I don't think I ever want to do it again because I was like, I don't know that this is, I think it was the second year when I saw all the women, straight women wearing no clothes. I was like, hey guys, I don't think this is for us. Like, I think you need to step the fuck aside. If you want to be an ally, that's fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to step the fuck out of the way and let.
Well, it's like
I don't want to say the right people step up, but
the warranted, worthy
worthy
feels a little.
I feel a little swarthy, but I don't know about worthy. Sorry.
No, I mean, I think about like bachelorette parties, going to gay bars.
Yeah.
And like that's not your space.
Or like gay men feeling very comfortable grabbing straight women's.
Yeah.
The Scarlett Johansson thing.
Yeah.
It's
Or
like, well,
even
it's
just
okay.
women.
Well, it's okay because I also think about the flip side of like the minute that he grabbed Scarlett's boobs, I thought you just gave 500 shitty male comedians a good joke and be like, oh, hell, I'll be gay if I can grab Scarlett's boobs. Like,
yep.
So dumb. Like, that's what I think about. Yeah, worthy is not the right word, but I get what you mean.
Yeah.
And the right person is not. I shouldn't be the face for this. I'm not the face for this.
Yep. But I mean, that's an issue of contention within the queer community itself. Is where do allies belong?
Yeah. Yeah. I also saw the weird thing of like the
LGBTQIAA.
So there is two A's.
LMNOP.
Yeah, it could almost go into the count and be like, L, ha, 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 G, ha, 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 ha. So there are two A's.
Well, it depends on who you ask.
I think that's the rabbit hole I'm wanting to go down.
But that's what it is. I think if you ask me, A stands for asexual.
Okay.
Because the LGBTQIA, right? I is intersex.
Okay.
All of those have to do with sex. The one major outlier is the T.
Wait, does T?
T has to do with gender,
Okay.
but also sex. So that's where, but
Okay.
but it's always been lumped because, at least in the way I argue it, which I'm not necessarily for it being grouped, but for ease, perhaps, there's the same coming out experience,
Okay.
right? So like,
Oh, it's asexual.
no.
Oh.
No.
Oh, across the board.
Yes,
Across
the
the
board.
letter-
So for LGB, for lesbian, gay, bisexual, asexual, and you can get into pansexual and so forth.
So where does non-binary fit in there? Is there an N in there?
There can be. That's why we've gone to queer. You know.
I think it's the double A. I didn't realize. I saw that like in the last 2 or 3 weeks where it was like, oh yeah, A can stand for asexual ally. I was like, nah, man. If we already got all these letters, let's just put 2 A's in there, man.
Yeah, well, some people would say allies included, but I would argue definitely against it because
Or maybe allies don't need to be in there.
allies don't need to be in there. No, they don't need to be in there.
I take back what I said.
Yeah, I think it's important to utilize our allies, right? In a way to say like, okay, so Jody, you're an ally, right? Like I know I can always count on you to like stand up and be like, nah, your homophobia shit is done.
Yeah.
It's over. And so like if I needed to go somewhere, promote something or whatever the case might be, and use an ally as like a liaison to the straight community,
Right.
then I would come to you. Right? Like that's the
Yeah.
way that I could utilize my allies. But to the point that allies are encroaching on our space,
The alphabet soup of it all.
the alphabet soup of all, but I'm thinking about pride, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like to the point that you're encroaching on our space, like that's not cool, man. Like that's our space, right? We've crafted it. We have fought for it, literally. This year being 50 years of Stonewall. And yet some people still feel like allies included. But yeah, transgender really it should stand alone.
Yeah.
Because it's a completely different experience. And that's part of the reason I think some people have conflated sexuality and gender. Because the T is included in the sexual minority community.
Okay.
But trans people can be straight. Trans people can be gay, lesbian, pan. Their sexuality has nothing to do with their gender identity.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we could just be LGBTQ plus ally. It can just be a word on the end or ally of. It doesn't have to be in the if I need to identify, whatever.
Yeah.
I also. Oh, I know what else. Damn it. I'm writing this down so I don't lose it again.
Okay.
Yeah, we were sitting around one time as a group of friends, and we were one of my friends, female, I'm going to point that out, was pointing out 2 things. And it's almost in the vein of hashtag Why Trump Won. It was, I think they need to stop with the letters because it's getting too long. And it's happened so quick, which is going to get into this, but I'll circle back around to that. But she was also talking about the Me Too movement because this is around the time that Al Franken got ousted. And she was like, I don't like that. She said, I don't like that there's not levels. It's either you're out. That's it. You're out. She was saying that for Al Franken. She's like, Al Franken is not Harvey Weinstein, whatever. He didn't pull his dick out. He didn't force people to do stuff. He made inappropriate jokes.
Right.
She's like, I don't like that there's no levels. And I was like, I understand that. And long term, that makes sense. Yeah. I think in that window, it was anybody. The way I put it is I saw a woman tweet. I was at a restaurant and a male waiter came up and started massaging my shoulders because I said something like, my shoulders hurt. Sure. So I know what it's like to be raped. I was like, nope.
Ooh, no.
Not even close.
Nope.
And I brought that up to her. I was like, levels. I was like, that's exactly what you're talking about. Because that woman's story is, she has a Me Too story. It's like, that guy's an asshole.
Yeah.
He deserves to be punched.
Right.
But he does not deserve to be thrown off the face of the earth for that.
Well, I think the Me Too movement, it addresses the larger issue of rape culture and assault culture. And that was and perhaps still is its purpose. And so everyone that has been contributing to that culture is being called out.
Yeah.
And
Ish.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to go with Quentin Tarantino, because Quentin Tarantino is almost the ally for the wrong side.
Yeah.
And it's still, well, but he makes good movies. Fuck you.
Exactly.
Fuck you. Go
Exactly.
away.
Yeah. I don't care what you produce. I don't care how amazing it is. You know, but if there comes in play the argument, and it's kind of like the cousin issue of capitalism and certain businesses or organizations that support anti-gay stuff. So like
Right.
Jesus Chicken at Chick-fil-A. My partner still eats there weekly.
I haven't ate at Chick-fil-A since that shit.
I haven't. I wish I could say the same. There's one thing I could eat there, and it was mostly out of convenience because we were on the road, and that's what she wanted. And you know, I don't judge her for it. It's food. But Kristen came to the argument that if we were to not support all of the organizations that are anti-LGBT, then we would have nothing left.
Yeah.
You know, or we would have very little left.
Yeah.
And so I see it in kind of tandem with that, because what were we just talking about?
Me Too.
The Me Too, yeah.
About getting rid of everybody.
Exactly. So like if we were to say, oh, well, if we were going to get rid of everybody, then there would be no entertainment left. You know, or very little or very, very poor entertainment.
Yeah.
Because the culture is much larger than, you know, media. It's much larger than that. It's the little things of rubbing someone's shoulders unconsented.
Yeah.
You know, but I agree on the levels, right? Like, to what extent can we punish somebody, right, who did something minimal but still contributed to the culture versus somebody who did something horrible and created the culture?
Yeah. Or sustained the culture for years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got fussed at on one of the, I ended up, I guess I can say this on here. I had to cut it out of the podcast because I made a comment about, and I realized there's a bigger picture here. And I couldn't get this person to understand that I'm a big brother. Mm-hmm. Like I have a sister who's 12 years younger than me. Mm-hmm. Young woman across the street. Please go with me to the end on this.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Because I know it's going to be a hard road ahead. KUB working on the road. Mm-hmm. 3 or 4 guys working in this ditch out here. Young woman across the street wearing a skirt so short and high heels to where she was pigeon walking or whatever you call that. Like, and the skirt was so short I could damn near see her panties from standing in my house.
At least she was wearing some.
Yeah. I like that you made the face because I got fussed at. I'm like, no, the problem is with the guys, not with the woman. I was like, but as a big brother, I want to go, please don't do that. Because these guys are pieces of shit, and I know we need to work on fixing them. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying you can't wear whatever the fuck you want. Right. But also, please don't wear that. Because you're smarter. God damn it. I can't even say this without, but I don't want to say you're better than that, but you are better than that. Like, don't let this represent who you are. Because these guys are shitheads. I know these guys are. Because my point was I wanted to sneak out the side with a cup of coffee and go, hey, boys, what we doing? Hey, fellas, what we doing? We're staring at her? Yeah, let's all stop that. Because you all have daughters or wives. If anybody stared at your daughter or wife, you'd smack the shit out of them. So, I know she doesn't need, I know this young woman doesn't need protecting. Mm-hmm. I know she doesn't need correcting. But it's just ingrained in me because I grew up in a household where my dad was like, oh, you touched a kid? You touched a woman? Yeah, don't send you to prison. We'll take care of you. I think it was very much that way of like, you don't do that.
Yeah.
So I think, And I could not get that person to understand the big brother mentality. She's like, that doesn't matter. You can't tell her what to wear. And you can't. I was like, Jesus Christ. Okay, I love you, but
yeah, it's a hard split between like the radical feminists, which I understand has a connotation all on its own.
But I feel like that kind of goes in the culture.
Yes.
Those guys are part of that culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But you can't, men think with their dicks. Like, my joke is that 99% of women are nuts, but 99.999999999% of men think with their dicks.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and my 99%, I had to say this on the front end of the dating one, which was by meaning crazy, because I've known women that changed who they were because of the guy they were dating. It's like, that's crazy. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about fatal attraction crazy. I'm talking about like, don't stop being who you are.
Yeah.
For some dude.
Yeah, but that's also part of the culture.
Yep.
Because women are taught and have been told that they need to cater to the man or the masculine person in the relationship, because this shit exists in lesbian relationships too.
Oh, okay.
In that, you have to appease somebody. You have to, like, you're the prize to be won. So you have to convince them that you are the best prize. And so you have to, if he likes fishing, you like fishing. Yeah. If he likes root beer, you like root beer. If he likes whips, you like whips. I don't know, like.
Well, and it's on the flip side of that, not all wives are battle axes.
Yeah.
And the other, I will say, in that vein, it took me until I was like 34, 35 to find a woman, and I've dated a lot, that didn't treat me like I wasn't lucky to be dating her. That she was lucky too. That actually took what you just said and flipped it on
absolutely
on its head.
Yeah. You gotta be yourself, you know, but it takes people years, even decades, to figure out who that is.
Or feel comfortable enough.
Exactly, feel comfortable
to
enough.
let their freak flag fly just because that's a good turn of phrase, not for any other reason. Just
right.
And I can't even say that damn phrase.
Freak flag fly.
Yeah. Shit. But yeah, the woman across the street, the culture, the Me Too is stopping the culture and everything. There should be levels. Yeah. And that's another one of those of like, am I going as a dude, as a straight dude, I hate the term cis, but we'll get to that. And it's just, I think that gets into my last little note here. I also feel bad for having to stifle what I say because I got to worry that I'm going to get canceled. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, can I just say the wrong thing and we talk it out instead of just yelling at one another? That's the biggest problem with the hashtag Wyatt Trump one shit is my argument to Sean all the time is I worry about the people on the left because I'm like, you keep fighting with one another and you keep slashing one another.
You're so sensitive.
But everybody on the right's just like, no, we're just getting behind this horse and we're going down the road. Like, whereas, do you see that in that community, in the queer community of like, you were talking about how some issues, with pride and how they deal with the parade or all this other stuff.
Everyone has something to say.
Okay.
Especially in the queer community. Everyone has something to say. Because once again, we're coming back to intersectionality. Everyone comes from different perspectives. And so within the queer community, there's a lot of voices to be heard. And a lot of them are opposing, right? So there are going to be people who are, well, we should be loud and proud, especially during Pride, because that's our day, that's our month, that's what we have to do. And then there's going to be people who are like, well, I'm bringing my child to Pride because, despite us being a straight family, because I want them to know that they're going to be welcomed and loved and accepted no matter who they grow up to be. Right. And, then there's the people who are just like, well, I go to Pride because I get to see my friends. Yeah. Right. Or I feel empowered by, seeing other people like me just exist.
Or feel safe.
Yeah. But then, there's also the argument. There was a whole thing about, so last year was the first Tri Pride in Johnson City. And we went, and you could see all the snipers and there were police everywhere. And it made people uncomfortable because there was so much police presence. It's like, well, geez, like how, I mean, like we need this much protection. Like
Yeah.
it, instead of making us feel safe, it made us unsafe.
Yeah.
Or made us feel unsafe, because you have to think about, well, why are they all here? You know, what do they do? Like, are there people threatening us when in reality there were 4 protesters? Yeah, that was it. I mean, even this year we saw snipers in Knoxville prides, like they were on the top of the building.
I didn't see the snipers.
They were there.
Okay.
They were there. And, you know, I've been in touch with Jen, the Knox Pride president, current anyways. And she's like, you know, we have a partnership with KPD, like, because they're there to protect us.
Well, I think I told you that the law director, I saw him that day, and he was like, this is the least amount of protesters we've ever had, and this is the smoothest it's ever been.
Right.
Which is wild, because this is the most antagonistic, headbutting time.
Well, I think a lot of it has spurred out of it being 50 years of Stonewall, and people are being reminded that Pride was not started as a happy-go-lucky event, but it was a riot. It was us. I say us. It was
the royal we.
Black trans women who fought, literally fought. Like Marsha P. Johnson was on the front lines, and yet a lot of depictions of the first Stonewall riots don't include her, which is bullshit. There was one movie made. I wasn't even going to touch it. But
the Stonewall movie?
The Stonewall movie.
Made by the guy who made Independence Day.
Yep. Yep. He put a white gay male, at the front lines as throwing the first brick, but it was Marsha. Fucking ridiculous. And so that's part of the issue, is that people look at, you know, the history of Stonewall, and they're like, well, it was a riot. We need to be angry. And well, yes, there's room to be angry, and there's warrant to be angry. We're past that, you know, like we're 50 years into the pride of being queer or anything related. And anger is not necessarily the way to go about it. You know, like we're more, I would say, in like a love and acceptance stage of our community. And I think we're happy here. We're making progress, slow, but all progress is slow.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's like you could read the paper to where you can, I don't know who said this. I'm sure it was a comedian, because all I listen to is fucking podcasts.
Yep.
And they also, a lot of them have the freedom to say what the hell they want.
Mm-hmm.
So what this person said, I'm not going to equate it to, it's like, give people time. And I think they were talking about like LGBTQ, all of the letters. And they were like, it went for this many years. Great podcasting, me doing my hands.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing my full wingspan of it just being LGBT.
Yeah.
Then it added Q.
Mm-hmm.
And then it added, and it kept adding.
Yeah.
And that person's point was, like a lot of the stuff with like non-binary and stuff now, the person at the Father John Misty show being like, I'm non-binary. It's like, okay, give me a second to process that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I wrote down was, give it time.
Yeah.
That person's vantage point was that they thought everything was moving so fast, and everybody is so aggressive on, you need to accept it, without giving people the time to actually understand and accept it. Because there's still intersectionality, not a fugging clue.
Yeah.
Till today.
Right.
And I'm an ally.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that shit.
Mm-hmm.
You have to give people time. And they said it was, I hate to keep saying hashtag why Trump won, but they're like, that's causing a lot of problems now, and forcing a lot of people to not be allies. You know what I mean? Like, not be full on board, because everybody's so aggressive on, you have to do it. You have to do it right now. And I don't understand why you're not doing it right now.
Right.
And they were like, if you just give people time, they're okay. If you're somebody who doesn't like gay people, it's because you don't know a gay person. Because
Right.
if you knew a gay person, you would not be anti-gay.
So I read an article recently, and I forget the name of it, but it was essentially talking about how we need to talk to strangers. We need to meet strangers, because the only way that we're going to learn and grow as a person, just individually, is by making ourselves uncomfortable. And so you need to go and expand your horizons and talk to people who you wouldn't normally associate with. And that's what's going to get you into being a more well-rounded human, which is what I would argue everyone should be after.
Exploring cultures that are not yours.
Right. Like I just, and I mean, maybe I'm coming from a point of privilege, but, and I mean, you might have something to say on this too, but like people who are born and raised and choose to stay in the same area.
Yeah.
That baffles me, because I couldn't imagine, but I have a different viewpoint of family and location and what that means. And so like, you know, the idea of being surrounded by the sameness all the time freaks me out. Right. Like I see myself just moving and changing and constantly going and meeting new people along the way. But then there are people, and you having been, you know, born and raised and still living in Knoxville.
And within 5 miles.
Exactly. So like, what's that experience for you?
Poverty.
Okay.
There was no other option.
Yeah.
And I've talked about, like, when we traveled when I was a kid, we went to Myrtle Beach every year. You know why? Because there were 20 other families when we went, and that's the only way we could afford to go.
Okay.
Or we would go to Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge when it was cheap as shit to go to Gatlinburg or Pigeon Forge. That's all we did. We never did anything outside of those two areas. Myrtle Beach, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, all we could afford.
Right.
So, well, it's wild because I go back and talk to kids at Fulton. There's still kids who grow up in the projects that I mentioned some restaurant downtown on Market Square. And they're like, we've never been to Market Square. I was like, you need to go to Market Square because it has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think when I got into high school and could drive, I would drive and explore different areas around here. And my circle kept expanding. And fortunately, I made enough money to where I was able to travel or talk my work into letting me travel. But I swear to God, here's the flip side. Every time I go somewhere, within a week, I'm like, I'm ready to go back home. I was like, this is good, but this is not where I want to be.
Right.
And I don't know if that's come out of, was it nature versus nurture? Like, I'm that way because this is the only thing I know. But it came out of poverty. Like, I would say 15 to 18 years ago, I was like, I need to move. It was after college. I think it's right after I bought the house. It's like, I need to move. Okay. So I started looking into, but I looked at like New York, Chicago, and London.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I was like, if I'm going to go, I'm either going to go big or stay home.
Yeah.
Because what's the point of going to Oklahoma City?
Nothing.
No slide on Oklahoma City, or I didn't want to go from same level to same level just to get outside of my comfort zone. I feel like making fun of Krista a little bit here, but I'm not going to because she will kill me. Well, there was a point, same thing, when I was struggling with like dating and everything. She's like, you probably need to move. New group of people. I was like, I'm not going to put all of my hopes and dreams on moving to Chattanooga and hope that I can meet a different woman.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't do that. Like, that's not... Anyway, so... but I looked at London, New York, and Chicago. And it was just too expensive. I actually looked at it and was like, I don't know how anybody does this. And it's gotten even worse. Like, it was bad back then. Fuck, it's even worse now.
Right.
To where it's like, I don't know how anybody makes that jump. They either have to have money or making a leap like that. Because even a buddy and I looked at doing it together so that we could help defer some of the costs. And it was like, now I understand why everybody moves here. I don't understand why anybody moves there, because it's like, how the fuck do you do it?
Well, so even with your having, been in the same 5 mile radius for so long, because like that's almost setting you up to be, like a closed-minded bigot, if you will. Right. But you're super duper not. So how did that happen? I guess is the question, right? Like, so thinking about meeting strangers, being uncomfortable, expanding your culture. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. It's probably a shit ton of things I'll try and distill down.
Is it intersectionality?
the word I just learned today. I think it was a little bit of dad. You know, he was in the service, and he had a time to. There was a point where he came back to San Francisco and was going to re-enlist, and the guy was like, "Go home for a week and then come back." And he came back. He's like, "I don't want. No, Knoxville's home. That's where I want to be." I think some of it's probably. What's funny is probably some of the reason why is anti the reason why it should be the other way, which is part of its southernness. Because I think the biggest part, though, is being comfortable in who I am as a person. I think that's the biggest thing, is I'm comfortable in who I am, so I can go to another city. And I hate to take it all the way back to the beginning into white privilege, but I don't have a lot of fear. I joke that I have real fear, like breaking my leg and not being able to work, or something like that. So, like when I go to New York, I also, because I kind of grew up rougher here, I know when there's real fear and when there's not real fear. Like when I went to New York for the first time, some of my friends talked me into being like, "Well, you know, you should be afraid of." I'm not going to be because A, I know how to handle myself. B, I know when real shit's about to pop off. And I've had some people, I can't remember his name, the guy who sat next to me when we were sitting out there smoking cigars, that the woman just moved here to be with him.
Oh, Corey.
No offense to Corey, but he kind of slagged on the fact that he's like, well, growing up rough in Detroit is different than growing up rough in Knoxville. Go, people still died. My graduating class, between 103 and 108, 2/3 are dead, in prison, or have done jail time.
Wow.
Don't diminish that because you think Detroit is tougher.
Right.
I've been in Detroit. I've been in the south side of Chicago. Same shit everywhere you go. Rough is rough.
Right.
I know there are more deaths in those locations.
That's just because they're highly densely populated.
But he kind of, I won't go, don't do that. Don't do that at all. Because you're just diminishing what I grew up with. Seeing a gun on my first day of school.
Yeah.
But I think it's that, being comfortable in myself and not having a lot of fear. So when I walked around New York, God, I hate to even slag on the southern accent. I can't tell I have an accent. There's a drinking game. How many times I say this? I can't tell I have an accent because I've met guys in Maynardville that I need subtitles when they talk. So I know that if I'm ever in an uncomfortable situation, to dip into an accent and you'll fuck people up.
Yep.
There's a guy in New York who came up and got in my face. And he was a big guy, but he was a little bit smaller than me. And he was wanting me to give him money. And he was too close. And he kept, on. I was like, and I listened to him talking and went, Bubba, I reckon we're fixing to have a problem. And he patted me on the chest and walked the fuck away.
Yep.
Part of going into Nat Sherman in New York cigar shop, because I did an entire episode on, I went to a cigar shop in Detroit, sat there and bullshitted with the guy next to me. I've sat in a bar and bullshitted with the woman next to me. Sat in Wrigley Field and talked to the woman next to me on one side, the guy next to me. I think it's not having fear, being comfortable in who I am, and being open to wanting to hear what other people are doing.
Yeah.
How the fuck all that happened, I don't know. I think it's honestly because there's a lot of my life that I look at as like, I shouldn't be here. I should be dead. So fuck it. What's the worst can happen, and also it's worth it for the story. This goes down into what I talked about a little bit with like Dale, in that she finally came to the realization like 8 months ago. She was like, I just realized something. I've known her for 5 or 6 years. She was like, I'm a tiny woman. I present like you look, big and scary and tough. She's like, you're a big guy. You present how I look. You have to put people at ease. She's like, I notice when you walk into a room, you walk around the side. You never are bombastic or anything like that. I was like, welcome to 6 years ago, dumbass. Like, yeah, this is how it's always been. She was like, I finally realized that. I'm like, good. I was like, that's what it's like being that's what it's like. So I understand that's what it's like. So I'm just comfortable in that. What the fuck's not made me a bigot? I think it's growing up in a more diverse environment when I was young, growing up with, I think it's a million little things.
Sure. Yeah.
It's weird. The weirdest thing in the world is that my grandfather, who was born in the teens and the 20s, did not use the N-word. I still think that's the weirdest fucking thing in the world.
Yeah.
And who knows what would have happened if that had not happened.
Right.
Because growing up in a black neighborhood, I never got called whiting, never got called honky.
Mm-hmm.
God knows I heard the N-word in the white neighborhoods a lot.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 10 years old, I was playing with a black kid in the front yard. Cop came up, started giving the kid shit. I went over and started kicking him in the shin. You want to talk about white privilege?
Wow.
Because I defended my buddy who was getting yelled at by a cop.
Right.
We were both 10 years old. That's fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Because think about the path that kid is on at 10 years old.
Yeah.
So I think it's growing up and seeing all that shit. It's just been like, eh. But on the flip side, the black community is still a little bit behind the times when it comes to LGBTQ issues.
Yeah, to an extent, for sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that still is rooted in religion, though.
So I've had that discussion a lot too. Is like, it's funny because everyone just assumes that politically black people are more left leaning. It's like, if you get down to the heart of it, no, they just vote left because it's more supporting of issues, like it's because it's not racist.
It's not racist, yeah, but it's less religious.
But when it comes to like abortion and gay
yeah,
issues and stuff,
they're very Christian, and I mean that's their prerogative, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that, I mean this might be me speaking out of my ass as a white person, but I think it goes back to way back when all they had was their faith, to get them through the day to day,
singing hymns.
Exactly.
As they were slaves. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, there's a huge, giant root of Christianity and just religion in general within the black community. And that, obviously hasn't really gone away. I mean, so I know you probably still haven't watched the new Queer Eye.
I watched the episodes with you all.
Okay, so you've watched a couple.
Yeah.
You still need to go back and watch the rest.
I know. I keep getting told I'm going to cry if I watch it.
Well, just watch it alone. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
But there's...
we got to talk about crying, and then we're going to end. But,
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
But
so there's an episode of Queer Eye about this woman. Of course, I don't remember her name, but she's a black woman who is very prominent in her community. This is in Atlanta, and she's a major leader in their church, and she has a gay son.
Okay.
And so they go and make her over, and they give a whole new reception room for the church, and they help the son as well. But it talks about blackness and religion and being queer and accepting. So that's the tidbit for that little segment.
I think it's that I just don't have time to watch anything.
Yeah.
I'm literally so far behind on, and there's too much good shit to watch now.
There's a lot right now.
Fuck, what was the thing I said? Don't let me forget.
Crying.
I had, in talking about feminists, I had someone yell at me because I made a joke about not wanting to cry in public. And they're like, you need to get rid of that patriarchy and that smashing that your feelings down and all that. And I want to go, Jesus Christ, can you stop telling me how to? I was like, maybe I just don't like to cry.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just something I don't like. What? Why the fuck can't I? Yeah.
First of all, shelf your fucking assumptions.
Yeah.
Second of all, it's not as easy as taking off your shoes.
No. God, that's a great part to end. Yeah, it's not as easy as taking off your shoes and showing your massive pedicure.
That's right. So take a fucking drink.
Yeah. Oh my God. And take another drink. Thank you.
Thank you.